Hello there, and welcome to The Tired Thinker, the corner of the internet where ideas slow down and the mind wanders into strange, shadowy places. Tonight's quiet exploration drifts into the unsettling side of human behavior, creepy psychology tricks that work too well. These are the subtle moves, quiet words, and small gestures that can shape decisions, stir emotions, and even bend someone's will, often without them realizing it. You've probably seen them before, hidden in conversations, crowded rooms, or tense moments. You may have even felt them work on you, a shiver down the spine, a sudden shift in mood, a choice you didn't quite make for yourself. Before we sink into these eerie little insights, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And what time is it, right now, in your corner of the world? It's a strange thing, isn't it? A video about influence and control, and yet here we are, scattered and silent, all tuning in to the same quiet thread of thought. If you find this kind of slow, unsettling psychology intriguing, or if you're here to rest your mind with a little soft darkness after a long day, I'd be grateful if you gave this video a like or gently subscribed. It helps this tired little channel reach others who might need a quiet place to explore the strange corners of the human mind. When two people interact, their bodies send signals long before words are spoken. Mirroring body language happens when one person subtly reflects the posture, movements, or expressions of another. It creates a silent connection, building trust and a sense of understanding. This process is natural and often happens without conscious thought. When done with care, it can strengthen relationships, improve communication, and reduce tension. At its core, mirroring works because people are drawn to those who seem similar to them. When gestures align, it suggests shared feelings or perspectives. This alignment creates comfort. A slight lean forward when another person leans forward, or resting hands on a table when they do, communicates unity without saying anything. These small actions speak a language the human brain recognizes instinctively. This effect is powerful in many settings. In professional environments, subtle mirroring can make conversations smoother and negotiations more successful. If one person starts with a closed posture, like crossed arms, matching that posture right away can feel confrontational. Keeping an open position while speaking calmly sets a different tone. When the other person relaxes and uncrosses their arms, reflecting that shift shows understanding and shared progress. This physical alignment signals cooperation and can help both sides reach agreement more easily. Mirroring also plays a role in personal relationships. When someone feels upset, adopting a posture similar to theirs shows empathy. Matching their slumped shoulders or lowered head signals that their emotions are seen and understood. As the interaction continues, a gradual return to a more positive, upright stance can guide the other person toward a calmer state. The shift happens without a single direct command. It works because humans are wired to respond to the nonverbal cues of those around them. This response comes from a natural biological system. The human brain has mirror neurons, which activate when observing the movements or emotions of others. These neurons help people feel what someone else feels, fostering empathy and a connection. From infancy, humans copy facial expressions and gestures, creating bonds long before they speak. Mirroring body language taps into this deep-rooted system and uses it to create harmony in everyday interactions. The impact of mirroring extends to conflict resolution. During heated discussions, emotions can rise and gestures can become sharp or exaggerated. If one person slows their breathing, lowers their voice, and moves with controlled gestures, the other person may begin to match that calmer energy. The overall tone shifts, and the argument becomes less intense. This does not manipulate the situation, but instead helps both individuals move toward mutual understanding. Cultural differences can affect how mirroring works. In some cultures, certain gestures signal agreement, while in others, they have different meanings. observing carefully before mirroring is essential. Starting with neutral actions, like adjusting walking pace or matching speaking rhythm, avoids misunderstandings. As familiarity grows, more specific movements can be reflected. This shows attentiveness and respect for cultural boundaries. There are times when direct mirroring can make a situation worse. If someone is visibly angry, pounding a fist, or using aggressive movements, copying that behavior will escalate tension. In these cases, it is better to mirror the intensity of the emotion rather than the action. A firm voice and steady eye contact can convey understanding, while the body remains calm and grounded. This approach acknowledges the person's feelings without adding conflict. Learning to mirror body language requires patience and practice. It starts by noticing how others move and sit. Choosing one simple element to reflect, like leaning slightly when they lean, builds awareness. Over time, this skill becomes more natural. The aim is never to mimic or manipulate, but to create a smooth, authentic flow between people. Even without words, bodies share information about trust, empathy, and connection. A mirrored gesture signals alignment in a way that words alone cannot. Whether during a business conversation, a family interaction, or a casual exchange, these small signals shape how people feel about each other. Through subtle reflection, silent barriers fall, and unspoken understanding grows. A name carries weight. It is one of the first things a person learns about themselves and one of the most powerful ways to capture their attention. When someone hears their name in conversation, it cuts through the noise around them. It signals that what comes next matters. This simple act creates a subtle bond between speaker and listener, making the interaction feel personal and meaningful. During a conversation, repeating a person's name at key moments has a unique effect. It draws them in and helps them focus. It also shows that they are valued. This works because the human brain responds strongly to personal identifiers. Hearing one's own name activates areas linked to self-awareness and memory. Even in a crowded space filled with voices, people can pick out their name instantly. This is known as the cocktail party effect, and it shows how deeply connected we are to this sound. Consider a professional setting, such as a meeting with a client. At the start, the speaker greets the client by name. This establishes a direct link. As the discussion continues, using the name again when introducing an important point signals respect and attentiveness. It shows that the speaker is addressing the client, not just delivering a generic message. If the client becomes distracted or hesitant, repeating their name can bring their focus back without having to demand it outright. The conversation feels more human, less mechanical, and trust begins to form. In social interactions, the same principle applies. Imagine two people meeting for the first time at a gathering. Early in the exchange, one repeats the other's name naturally. This helps with memory, but also builds connection. When the name appears again later in the conversation, it feels familiar and warm. It reduces distance between them and turns a casual exchange into a personal experience. Even brief encounters can feel significant when someone feels seen and recognized. This technique works best when it feels natural and unforced. Overuse can have the opposite effect. If a name is repeated too many times, it can seem like flattery or manipulation. The key is balance. A name at the beginning to establish connection, another in the middle to maintain engagement, and perhaps one at the end to leave a lasting impression is often enough. This rhythm mirrors the way names surface naturally in genuine speech. Using a name also helps navigate difficult conversations. When emotions run high, it can be hard to keep someone's attention or guide the discussion back to calm ground. Addressing them by name creates a moment of pause. It reminds them that the words are directed specifically toward them and encourages them to listen. This technique is common in conflict resolution and negotiation, where focus and clarity are essential. Names play a role in group settings as well. In a team meeting, A leader who uses individual names creates inclusion. When giving feedback, saying, "This was well done," has less impact than, "Alex, this was well done." The latter connects the praise directly to the person and reinforces their contribution. This works with constructive feedback too. Saying, "Taylor, let's adjust this part," makes the guidance clear and personal without sounding harsh. It reduces confusion and strengthens accountability. The power of names extends beyond spoken conversation. Written communication, such as emails or messages, also benefits. Beginning a message with a name instantly signals attention and intent. It sets the tone for the rest of the interaction. This small gesture separates thoughtful communication from mass or automated messages, which often lack that personal touch. There are subtle ways to integrate names into everyday exchanges. When meeting someone for the first time, repeating their name shortly after hearing it helps with recall. It also signals that you value the introduction. During ongoing conversations, inserting the name before asking a question draws the person in. When closing a conversation, ending with their name leaves a final mark of connection. These small moments add up, shaping the overall experience. Different settings require different levels of formality. In some environments, using a full name may feel respectful and professional. In others, a first name alone feels warmer and more casual. Observing context and adapting shows awareness. For example, in a formal workplace, addressing a senior figure by their title and surname may be appropriate at first. As rapport grows, shifting to a first name can reflect the evolving relationship. The effect of hearing one's name ties back to human development. From childhood, names signal attention and care. When a parent calls a child by name, it creates safety and recognition. These early experiences shape how people respond to names throughout life. Even in adulthood, that same reflex remains. A name spoken with respect can calm stress, spark focus, and create trust. Misuse, however, can break that trust. If a name is used with negative intent, like in criticism, delivered with anger, it may trigger defensiveness. The same is true if someone's name is mispronounced repeatedly or used carelessly. Taking the time to learn and say a name correctly shows effort and respect. This small act can strengthen a bond before any other words are spoken. In crowded or noisy situations, a name cuts through distractions. It acts as a verbal signal, directing attention without force. This is especially useful in group conversations. When several people speak at once, calling on someone by name creates clarity. It brings the focus back to a single thread, preventing confusion. Using names can even influence memory. When a conversation feels personal, the details stick. The person is more likely to remember what was discussed because the interaction engaged their sense of identity. This makes names a practical tool for teaching, training, and leadership. By anchoring information to someone's name, the message becomes more memorable. This practice takes mindfulness. It requires listening carefully and noticing when to use a name naturally. When done well, it feels seamless. The person on the receiving end does not notice the technique, only the sense of being valued and understood. Over time, these moments create strong relationships built on trust and recognition. Names may be short, but their impact is lasting. Whether spoken softly in a quiet room or heard across a crowded space, they hold attention like few other words can. By using a name with care and intention, a simple conversation becomes something deeper, creating a silent thread that links two people through understanding and respect. When two people speak, there's always more being said than the actual words. Beneath the surface, there are emotions, priorities, and hidden meanings. One of the simplest ways to uncover these layers is by repeating certain keywords the other person uses. This technique is subtle. It shows that you are listening and encourages them to continue sharing. It does not require complex language or clever responses. It only requires careful attention and a willingness to echo what matters most to them. When someone chooses specific words, those words carry weight. They reveal what they care about or what troubles them. By repeating those words back in a natural way, you create a moment of recognition. It feels like you have stepped into their world and understood their point of view. This builds trust and helps the conversation go deeper. The other person feels heard, and people who feel heard tend to speak more openly. Imagine a conversation about work. One person says, "I've been feeling overwhelmed with all these deadlines." Instead of giving advice right away, the listener could respond by saying, "Deadlines." That single word repeated back signals that the listener caught the most important part of the sentence. The speaker will likely continue, adding details about why the deadlines matter so much or what pressures they feel. Without any prompting, they open up because they sense the listener's focus. This approach works well in situations where emotions are involved. If someone says, "I'm frustrated because no one seems to value my ideas," the listener might reflect the words, "value your ideas." This simple repetition can lead the speaker to explain further. They might describe specific moments when they felt ignored or dismissed. By repeating their own words, the listener encourages them to dig deeper without pushing or prying. The speaker guides the conversation while the listener provides steady support. The technique works because it mirrors natural human behavior. People often repeat words when they are deeply engaged. Think of a time when someone told you a story and you echoed part of what they said without thinking. This happens in everyday conversation because it feels natural. When done with intention, it becomes a powerful tool for connection. It can be especially effective in resolving conflicts. During a disagreement, people often feel defensive. They may worry that they are not being understood. By reflecting key words, the listener shows that they are paying attention, even if they do not agree. For example, if one person says, "I'm upset because this project was rushed," the other might say, "rushed." That single word acknowledges the feeling without judgment. It softens the tension and invites the other person to explain further. As they expand on their thoughts, the conversation shifts from anger to understanding. This technique also works in professional settings, like interviews or negotiations. When someone uses a word to describe what they value, repeating it shows alignment. If a hiring manager says, "We need someone who is reliable," the candidate can reflect that by saying, "reliable." This signals that they have understood the priority. It creates a bridge between what is being asked and what is being offered. The exchange feels collaborative rather than transactional. The power of repeating key words lies in its simplicity. It does not require elaborate sentences. In fact, shorter responses are often better. A single repeated word or short phrase is enough to keep the conversation flowing. It leaves space for the other person to fill with their thoughts. This balance creates a natural rhythm where one person speaks and the other guides gently without interrupting. There are times when this technique must be used with care. If repeated too often, it can feel forced or insincere. The goal is not to parrot every word, but to select the ones that matter most. Paying attention to tone and pacing helps keep the interaction authentic. If the speaker seems emotional about a certain word, that is a good sign it should be reflected back. If they mention something casually, it may not need repetition. Listening closely is essential. It is not just about the words themselves, but also how they are said. A single phrase can carry different meanings depending on emphasis. If someone says, "I just can't keep up," the key word might be keep up. Reflecting that back invites them to explain what keeping up means to them. It might refer to workload, personal expectations, or something entirely different. The listener does not assume. They simply open the door for more clarity. This method also strengthens memory. When you repeat someone's words, you are more likely to remember them later. This is useful in ongoing relationships, whether personal or professional. When a person hears their own words echoed back, they feel understood, and the listener has a stronger grasp of what matters to them. Over time, this builds a foundation of trust. In group conversations, repeating keywords can guide the flow without taking control. If several people are speaking, reflecting a key term helps refocus the discussion. For example, in a meeting where ideas are being thrown around, someone might say, "The main problem is communication." If the facilitator repeats communication, it signals that this is an important point worth exploring. The group naturally shifts toward that topic without anyone needing to issue commands. This technique can also be valuable in teaching or coaching. When a learner expresses confusion, repeating their exact words can help clarify the issue. If a student says, "I'm stuck on this step," the teacher might respond, "This step." That brief reflection shows that the teacher is focused on the specific challenge. It encourages the student to explain where they are stuck, leading to a clearer solution. Even in casual conversations, this approach adds depth. When someone talks about a dream, a fear, or a hope, reflecting their key words shows that those feelings are acknowledged. It creates a moment of shared understanding. These moments are quiet but powerful, shaping relationships over time. Repeating key words is not about control or persuasion. It is about creating space for another person to speak fully. It shows that their words matter and that you are listening closely. In a world filled with distractions, that kind of attention is rare. By offering it, you invite others to open up and share what they might otherwise keep hidden. When two people talk about a problem, they often come to the conversation with their own ideas and strong opinions. If one person jumps straight to their point, the other may feel defensive. They may stop listening even before the idea has a chance to be heard. A simple way to avoid this wall is to begin with agreement. Starting from a place of common ground creates safety. It signals respect and makes the other person more open to new information. Agreement does not mean surrender. It does not require abandoning your beliefs or hiding your true opinion. It is about recognizing what is valid in what the other person has said and acknowledging it before adding your perspective. This approach softens resistance and builds a bridge instead of a barrier. Picture two coworkers discussing how to handle a tight project deadline. One believes the team should push hard to meet the original date. The other thinks a short extension would lead to better results. If the second coworker says, "We can't possibly hit that deadline, it's unrealistic," the first will likely push back. The conversation may turn into a battle of wills. But if the second begins with, "You're right, meeting the deadline is important. We all want to deliver on time," the tone changes. That opening statement shows alignment on the goal. Then they can continue with, "To do that, I think we might need an extra 2 days so we can fix any errors before launch." The initial agreement lowers tension. The first coworker feels understood and is more likely to consider the proposal. This technique works because people want to feel heard. When someone feels dismissed, their natural response is to defend themselves. Even a good idea will be rejected if it comes wrapped in conflict. By starting with agreement, you validate the other person's perspective. It creates a moment where they can relax and listen. This opens the door for influence. In personal relationships, the same principle applies. Imagine a couple deciding how to spend the weekend. One wants to stay home and rest. The other wants to go out and socialize. If one person says, "You never want to go out," the other will immediately feel attacked. The conversation becomes about defending that statement rather than solving the problem. But if it begins with, "I get why you want to stay home. You've had a long week and need to recharge," the mood shifts. From there, it becomes easier to add, "Maybe we can stay in tonight and go out tomorrow." The first statement shows empathy and agreement, making the second idea easier to accept. The power of this approach lies in its natural flow. Agreement acts like a soft landing before introducing something new. It tells the other person that their thoughts are valid, even if you see things differently. This makes your own idea feel less like a challenge and more like a continuation of the conversation. This method can be especially useful in negotiations. A buyer and a seller often start on opposite sides. If the seller begins by dismissing the buyer's concerns, trust breaks down. But if the seller says, "You're right, the cost is an important factor," they create alignment. Once that point is acknowledged, they can add, "Here's why this price reflects the value you'll receive." The buyer's defenses lower, making space for reason and collaboration. This technique also works in leadership. A manager giving feedback to an employee might want to suggest a change in behavior. If they start with criticism, the employee may shut down. Instead, the manager can begin by agreeing with the employee's effort or intention. They might say, "I can see you put a lot of work into this project, and your attention to detail shows." Then they can add, "I think we can make it even better by adjusting the timeline for reviews." The employee feels appreciated, which makes them more receptive to the suggestion. Starting with agreement requires listening carefully. It means noticing what the other person values and identifying points of overlap. Sometimes these points are small, like agreeing on the importance of a shared goal. Other times they are larger, like recognizing a shared concern or belief. The agreement must be genuine. Empty flattery will backfire. The person on the other side will sense dishonesty and become even more resistant. The timing matters too. The agreement should come right before introducing your own idea. If there is too much delay, the connection may fade. If it comes too late, it may seem like a tactic rather than a natural part of the exchange. The transition should feel seamless, as though both thoughts belong together. Consider a teacher addressing a group of students about classroom rules. If the teacher starts by saying, "You've been breaking the rules and this needs to stop," the students may tune out or rebel. But if the teacher begins with, "I know everyone here wants a positive and safe learning space," the message lands differently. After that, saying, "To make that happen, we need to stick to these rules," feels like a shared effort instead of a punishment. This approach also works in situations where trust is fragile. When people have been in conflict, agreement acts like a peace offering. It shows willingness to meet halfway. Even a small point of agreement can shift the entire dynamic. Once trust begins to rebuild, more challenging topics can be addressed without triggering defensiveness. There are limits to this strategy. Agreement should never cross into falsehood. If you pretend to agree with something you believe is harmful or untrue, the conversation will lack integrity. The other person may sense the mismatch between your words and your true feelings. Instead, find authentic common ground. Even if you disagree on many things, there is almost always at least one shared value, such as safety, fairness, or efficiency. Starting there creates a foundation for honest dialogue. Over time, using this method can change how conversations feel. Discussions become less about winning and more about solving problems together. When people experience consistent acknowledgement of their perspective, they grow more willing to listen in return. Ideas flow more freely, and decisions become easier to reach. At its core, starting with agreement is about connection. It turns confrontation into collaboration. It shows that even in disagreement, respect remains. When someone feels respected, they no longer need to fight for recognition. Their energy shifts from defense to openness, making space for new ideas to take root. In this way, agreement becomes the quiet force that guides a conversation forward. A single gentle touch can speak louder than words. Long before people learned to talk, touch was the first language. It signaled safety, comfort, and connection. Even today, in a world filled with noise and constant messages, a brief light touch can cut through barriers and reach someone on a deeper level. When used with care, it builds trust and can increase the chance that someone will respond positively to a request or suggestion. The power of touch lies in its simplicity. A brief hand on the shoulder or light contact on the arm is enough to create a bond. It does not need to last more than a second. The goal is not to control or dominate, but to send a quiet message. I see you and I am here with you. When done correctly, this type of touch feels natural and supportive, not invasive. Consider a situation where someone needs help carrying a heavy box. A passerby could simply say, "Can you give me a hand?" and hope for cooperation. But if they lightly touch the person's arm as they make the request, the likelihood of help increases. The touch draws attention and signals sincerity. It also breaks the invisible barrier of distance between strangers, making the interaction more personal. The person being asked feels acknowledged and is more inclined to respond positively. This effect is not limited to casual encounters. In a workplace setting, a brief touch can reinforce trust between colleagues. When a team member completes a difficult task, a manager might place a light hand on their shoulder while expressing appreciation. The touch underscores the words, turning a simple thank you into a moment of genuine recognition. It strengthens the bond between them without needing a long speech. The same action during a stressful moment can also provide reassurance, letting someone know they are supported. Touch works because it taps into deep biological responses. Human skin contains receptors that send signals directly to the brain. These signals release chemicals like oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone. Even a small amount of physical contact can trigger feelings of closeness and safety. This response is automatic and does not require conscious thought. It is part of how humans are wired to connect. There are, however, important boundaries to respect. Touch must always be appropriate to the relationship and the situation. A light hand on the shoulder is generally safe in professional or casual contexts. Anything more can feel intrusive. The key is to make the gesture brief and respectful, so it comes across as supportive rather than aggressive. Observing body language helps too. If someone steps back or looks uncomfortable, it is a sign to keep more distance. In personal relationships, touch plays an even greater role. A comforting pat on the back during a difficult time can communicate care more effectively than words. During celebrations, a quick clasp on the shoulder can share excitement and pride. These small gestures become part of the unspoken language between people who trust one another. They build closeness without needing constant verbal reassurance. This subtle form of communication can also ease tense situations. Imagine two people in conflict. Voices rise, and emotions run high. Words alone may not calm the storm. A gentle touch on the arm, timed carefully, can shift the energy. It signals a desire to connect rather than fight. While it does not solve the problem by itself, it opens the door to a more constructive exchange. The other person feels acknowledged on a human level, which makes them more willing to listen. Cultural context matters when using touch. In some places, casual physical contact is common and expected. In others, even a brief touch may feel too forward. Knowing the norms of the environment helps avoid misunderstandings. When in doubt, observing how others interact can provide guidance. As people rarely touch in public settings, it is wise to keep a respectful distance. If light contact is common, a brief touch can be an accepted way to show connection. The timing of the gesture is as important as the gesture itself. A touch that comes too early in a conversation may feel forced. Too late, and it loses its impact. Ideally, it happens at a natural pause, such as after expressing gratitude or offering support. In this way, the touch becomes part of the flow rather than an awkward interruption. There is research that supports the effectiveness of light touch in gaining cooperation. Studies have shown that people are more likely to agree to requests when accompanied by brief, appropriate physical contact. For instance, a waiter who lightly touches a customer's shoulder when presenting the bill often receives higher tips. The touch creates a momentary bond, making the interaction feel more personal. The customer, even if unaware of it, feels a sense of goodwill toward the waiter. In everyday life, this can translate into many small moments. Helping a neighbor, guiding a friend through a crowded space, or offering comfort to someone at set can all involve a gentle touch. Each instance reinforces connection and trust. Over time, these small actions build stronger relationships. They form a network of unspoken messages that deepen understanding between people. Touch is especially powerful when combined with other forms of communication. A calm tone of voice and attentive eye contact amplify the effect. Together, these elements create a sense of harmony. For example, when giving instructions, a leader might lightly touch a team member's shoulder while speaking clearly. The gesture shows confidence and care, making the words more persuasive. There are times when touch is not appropriate. In professional settings with strict boundaries, such as healthcare or education, rules may limit physical contact. In these cases, nonverbal alternatives like nodding or using someone's name can serve similar purposes. The goal remains the same: to create a sense of connection and trust without crossing lines. The impact of touch often lingers beyond the moment itself. A person may forget the exact words spoken, but remember the feeling of reassurance or recognition that came from that brief contact. This lasting impression shapes how they view future interactions. It can turn a neutral relationship into one of trust and cooperation. Touch is not about power or control. It is about connection. A single, light gesture can bridge gaps that words cannot. It signals empathy and presence in a way that is immediate and deeply human. In a world where people often feel isolated or distracted, that small act of physical recognition can change the course of an interaction. Through careful timing, respect for boundaries, and genuine intention, a gentle touch on the shoulder becomes more than a gesture. It becomes a silent message of trust and understanding. Eye contact is one of the most powerful nonverbal tools in human interaction. A glance can signal interest, trust, or connection. When two people look at each other, even for a moment, a silent exchange happens. Most of the time, this exchange is brief. The eyes meet, then break away, and the rhythm continues naturally. But when eye contact lingers longer than expected, it shifts the balance of the conversation. It creates a subtle tension. The person holding the gaze gains control, while the other begins to feel exposed or even challenged. This effect happens because the human brain is wired to treat direct eye contact as something significant. In nature, animals interpret a prolonged stare as a sign of dominance or threat. Humans carry this same instinct. A steady, unbroken gaze sends a signal that the person looking is confident and in control. The person being looked at may feel pressure, as if they are being studied or judged. The longer it continues, the stronger this feeling grows. Imagine a discussion in a boardroom. Several people are seated around a table, reviewing a major decision. Most participants glance at one another briefly before looking back at their notes. One person, however, fixes their gaze on another and holds it. The room feels different almost instantly. The one being stared at becomes hyper-aware of their every word. They may stumble slightly or rush to explain their point more carefully. The person holding the gaze does not need to raise their voice or interrupt. The sustained eye contact alone shifts the balance of power, setting the tone for the entire interaction. This type of control works because it disrupts the usual rhythm of conversation. People expect eye contact to flow like a dance, brief, mutual glances that come and go. When one person breaks that pattern by holding their gaze too long, it stands out. It signals that they are unafraid to claim space. Even without speaking, they assert dominance. The other person feels the weight of that focus and reacts, often by yielding in small ways. They may soften their stance, agree more quickly, or look away to relieve the pressure. Prolonged eye contact can be a deliberate tactic in negotiations. When two sides discuss terms, silence can be just as important as words. A negotiator who maintains steady eye contact during a pause creates discomfort. The other party may rush to fill the silence, sometimes revealing more than they intended. This technique works because most people find it difficult to stay calm under that level of scrutiny. Their instinct is to break the tension, and in doing so, they may give up valuable ground. There are subtle variations in how this plays out. A slightly narrowed gaze, combined with a still posture, amplifies the effect. The lack of movement signals complete focus, making the other person feel like they are under a spotlight. In contrast, if the gaze is intense, but paired with calm breathing and a relaxed expression, it feels more like quiet authority than outright aggression. The difference lies in how the person receiving the gaze interprets it. In either case, the prolonged eye contact sets the dynamic. This approach appears in everyday situations as well. In a simple conversation, most people break eye contact every few seconds. This keeps the exchange comfortable and fluid. When one person holds their gaze past that natural point, the other begins to notice. They may wonder why the gaze is lingering. Questions rise in their mind. Am I being judged? Do they disagree with me? What are they thinking? This internal dialogue creates unease, giving the person with the steady gaze a subtle upper hand. Consider a teacher addressing a classroom. Most students listen passively, looking up occasionally before glancing back at their notes. If the teacher locks eyes with a student and holds the gaze, the student often sits straighter or pays closer attention. The effect is not just about fear, but about accountability. The student feels seen and cannot fade into the background. A teacher does not need to say a word to demand focus. The eyes alone issue the command. This dynamic can also appear in personal relationships. When two people argue, emotions rise quickly. If one person maintains steady eye contact throughout the exchange, it can shift the balance of the argument. The person looking away first often feels as if they have lost ground. Even without realizing it, they may adjust their tone or position to regain equilibrium. In this way, prolonged eye contact becomes a silent form of negotiation. Cultural differences play a role in how eye contact is perceived. In some cultures, direct eye contact is expected and seen as a sign of respect. In others, it can be considered rude or confrontational. Understanding these differences is essential. What feels like confident communication in one setting might be viewed as aggressive in another. The key is to read the environment and adjust accordingly. Timing matters as much as intention. Holding someone's gaze for a few extra seconds at a crucial moment can be powerful. Doing it continuously throughout an interaction can cross into discomfort or intimidation. The most skilled communicators know when to apply this pressure and when to release it. By breaking eye contact at the right moment, they keep the other person slightly off balance without alienating them entirely. There is a physical response that comes with being stared at. The body may tense, the heartbeat may quicken, and breathing may become shallow. This reaction happens even when the mind tries to stay calm. The subconscious interprets the prolonged gaze as a signal of dominance. It is similar to standing under a bright light while someone examines you closely. This discomfort drives people to act in ways they might not under normal circumstances. They may agree to requests, share information, or step back from a position simply to escape the feeling. In leadership, this tool can command respect without words. A leader who maintains strong eye contact during key moments signals confidence and authority. Followers often respond by aligning with that presence. However, the line between leadership and intimidation is thin. If the gaze becomes too sharp or unrelenting, it can foster fear rather than trust. The difference lies in balance. A leader who knows when to soften their gaze shows strength without hostility. In casual settings, prolonged eye contact can create awkwardness. Most people instinctively look away after a few seconds to keep the interaction comfortable. When that pattern is broken, it becomes memorable. Even a brief moment can linger in the mind, shaping how someone views the other person long after the conversation ends. This lasting effect is why prolonged eye contact is such a powerful tool. It reaches beyond the surface of words and influences behavior on a deeper level. The eyes have always been a window into human intent. A fleeting glance can invite connection. A steady gaze can inspire trust. But when that gaze stretches past what is expected, it changes the entire atmosphere. The person holding the gaze claims control, while the one being watched feels the weight of it. This quiet exchange can alter the course of a conversation without a single word being spoken. Physical space shapes perception long before words are spoken. When one person is positioned slightly higher than another, even by a few inches, it creates an unspoken message about status. This effect happens in offices, homes, public spaces, and anywhere people gather. Standing while another person sits, or choosing a seat that gives a higher vantage point, changes the balance of power. The difference does not need to be dramatic. A subtle shift is often enough to influence how others feel and respond. The human mind links height with authority. This connection comes from early experiences and natural instincts. Children look up to adults, both literally and figuratively. Over time, the upward gaze becomes associated with guidance, control, and leadership. When someone occupies a higher physical position, it triggers this deep-seated association. The person below may not consciously notice, but they often react by yielding space, listening more intently, or softening their stance. Consider a workplace scenario where two colleagues meet to discuss a project. If both sit at the same level, the conversation tends to feel balanced. Each person has equal ground to express ideas. Now imagine one person remains standing while the other sits. The standing individual appears more dominant. Their presence feels larger, and their words carry extra weight. Even if the content of the conversation does not change, the dynamics shift. The seated person often becomes more passive, listening rather than challenging. This subtle imbalance can influence decisions without either party fully realizing why. This principle also appears in leadership settings. A manager who speaks to their team while standing at the front of a room naturally commands attention. The elevated position signals authority and control over the space. Team members look upward, reinforcing the perception of leadership. Even in casual team huddles, a leader who stands slightly taller can guide the group more effectively than if they were at the same level. The height difference acts as a nonverbal cue that shapes behavior. Negotiations highlight this effect in a different way. Two sides might meet at a table to discuss terms. If one person arrives early and chooses a chair with a higher back or slightly raised seat, they create a position of advantage. The extra height may be small, but it changes how the other party perceives them. During tense moments, the higher position provides a psychological edge. It signals quiet strength and can influence the outcome, especially when combined with steady tone and calm behavior. This dynamic shows up outside formal environments as well. In a social setting, a person standing over someone seated can make the seated individual feel exposed. The interaction becomes one-sided, with the standing person setting the pace. This can be useful in certain situations, like offering comfort or guidance. A parent leaning over a child creates a natural sense of care and direction. However, if used carelessly, the same posture can feel intimidating or controlling. The effect is not always about physical height alone. Even small adjustments in posture can create the same impression. Sitting tall with shoulders back conveys more authority than slouching, even when both people are at the same level. A well-placed stool, step, or platform can shift the balance subtly. For example, a speaker addressing a small group might sit on a bar stool while others sit in regular chairs. The difference is slight, but it gives the speaker a natural position of leadership without seeming overbearing. This principle plays a role in courtroom settings. Judges sit on elevated benches, looking down at those who appear before them. The design reinforces the authority of the role. Similarly, stages, podiums, and raised platforms exist to separate the speaker from the audience. These structures make the person above appear larger, more commanding, and more credible. The audience, looking up, unconsciously assigns them greater influence. There is also a connection between physical space and emotional tone. When someone feels vulnerable, being physically lower can heighten that feeling. A person lying on a hospital bed, for example, often feels at the mercy of those standing around them. Healthcare workers who are mindful of this might choose to sit beside the patient, bringing themselves to the same level. This simple act reduces anxiety and creates a sense of partnership rather than hierarchy. In contrast, when a doctor remains standing, patient may feel talked down to or excluded from decisions. The timing of positioning matters. Shifting from a seated to a standing position at a key moment can emphasize a point without words. During a heated discussion, standing up can reset the dynamic. It signals that the conversation has reached a turning point. Conversely, choosing to sit when others expect you to stand can soften tension. The change in posture speaks directly to the emotions in the room. Even within families, this principle shapes daily interactions. A parent bending down to speak to a child creates closeness and understanding. Rising to full height when giving a serious instruction adds gravity to the message. Children respond to these cues instinctively, adjusting their behavior based on whether the interaction feels nurturing or authoritative. Cultural context influences how these dynamics are perceived. In some places, standing over someone is seen as natural and respectful, while in others it may be viewed as aggressive. Formal ceremonies often include deliberate height differences to reflect social structure. Thrones, balconies, and platforms exist for this reason. They communicate rank without a single word being spoken. Understanding these signals helps avoid misunderstandings when moving between different environments. The effect of positioning is magnified when combined with other nonverbal signals. A person who is physically higher and also maintains steady eye contact amplifies their presence. If their tone is calm and their body language open, they project confident leadership. If their expression is stern and their gestures sharp, the same height difference can feel intimidating. The physical position sets the stage, while other cues shape how it is interpreted. This principle can be used strategically in everyday life. In a job interview, choosing a chair that allows for good posture and clear eye contact conveys readiness. In a negotiation, being mindful of seat height can prevent unintentional power imbalances. Even in casual conversations, small adjustments, like standing slightly taller when giving directions or sitting lower when offering comfort, can shape the outcome. While height differences can influence perception, the effect is subtle rather than absolute. Words, actions, and tone still matter. A person seated lower can still command respect through clarity and confidence. Likewise, someone standing higher can lose authority through poor communication. The physical position is one layer of the interaction, adding weight to the message being sent. Awareness of this dynamic allows for conscious choices. Whether standing, sitting, or shifting between the two, each position carries meaning. By noticing how space and height shape interactions, it becomes possible to guide conversations without force. A small step up or down can change how others feel, setting the stage for trust, influence, or resolution. The sound of a voice carries meaning far beyond the words spoken. Tone, pitch, and volume shape how a message is received, often more than the content itself. A voice that is lower and steady naturally commands attention. It signals authority, calmness, and confidence. People respond instinctively to such a voice because it feels certain and trustworthy. Even without realizing it, they become more open to a speaker's influence. A lower tone does not mean speaking loudly or forcefully. It means using depth and softness to create presence. When a voice drops slightly in pitch, it grounds the words, making them feel more deliberate. This effect is most powerful when combined with controlled breathing. A steady breath supports a steady tone, giving the impression of balance and self-assurance. Others hear this balance and often mirror it, relaxing their own posture and mode. Consider a meeting where tension runs high. Several people are talking over one another, and the conversation grows chaotic. One person remains quiet until the right moment. When they speak, their voice is lower and softer than the surrounding noise. The room begins to settle. People lean in to hear, and the tone itself draws attention. The words may be simple, but the delivery changes the atmosphere. This happens because a calm, deep voice cuts through stress like a steady hand guiding a storm. This same effect appears in leadership. A manager addressing a team after a difficult setback can choose many approaches. If they raise their voice or speak too quickly, anxiety spreads. But if they keep their voice low and measured, they create stability. The team senses direction and feels safe following it. Even without offering complete solutions, the tone reassures them that challenges can be managed. The leader's calm presence becomes a silent promise that things will move forward. The psychology behind this response is deeply rooted. Throughout history, leaders, teachers, and figures of authority have been associated with deep, resonant voices. The human brain links low tones with strength and reliability. High, sharp tones often signal alarm or fear. In nature, many animals use deep sounds to establish dominance or protect territory. Humans are not so different. A lower voice triggers an instinctive reaction of respect or attention, even when the listener does not consciously notice. In negotiations, tone can influence outcomes as much as the arguments themselves. Two people may present equally strong points, but the one who speaks with a lower, steady voice often gains the upper hand. This tone creates the impression of certainty. The other party begins to question their own stance, not because of the facts, but because of how those facts are delivered. Even silence between statements carries weight when held by a calm, confident tone. The pauses become part of the conversation, adding gravity to every word. This technique works outside professional settings as well. In personal relationships, tone shapes trust. When comforting someone, a deep and gentle voice can calm emotions more effectively than rushed reassurances. Imagine a friend in distress. Words alone may not reach them, but the sound of a steady voice can slow their breathing and ease their fear. The message is not just heard, it is felt. The tone says, "You are safe," in a way that logic cannot. Parents use this instinctively with children. A child upset by fear or frustration responds more to the tone of a parent's voice than to the exact words spoken. A sharp, high-pitched voice may escalate the emotion, while a lower, soothing tone brings the child back to calm. Over time, this creates a pattern. The child learns to associate that sound with comfort and guidance. Adults carry similar associations into their interactions with others, often without realizing it. Control is key when using a lower voice tone. Dropping too low or speaking too softly can make the words difficult to hear. The aim is to find a balance where the voice has depth but remains clear. This requires attention to breathing. Speaking from the chest rather than the throat gives natural resonance. Shallow breaths lead to a higher, strained sound, while deeper breaths support a grounded tone. Practicing this technique can transform not only how others hear you, but also how you feel when speaking. There are moments when lowering the voice becomes a powerful tool for persuasion. During a disagreement, raising the voice can escalate tension. Lowering it has the opposite effect. It signals control and invites the other person to match that calmness. Imagine two people debating a heated issue. One grows louder, trying to dominate the exchange. The other responds by slowing their words and softening their tone. This unexpected shift changes the dynamic. The louder person feels the difference and may lower their own voice in response. The conversation moves towards resolution rather than conflict. Tone also influences group dynamics. In a crowded room, people naturally focus on the voice that stands out. Often, that voice is not the loudest, but the most controlled. A speaker who drops their tone and speaks clearly draws attention because others must lean in to listen. This creates intimacy even in large gatherings. The listeners feel personally addressed, as though the speaker is speaking only to them. This effect builds connection and makes the message more memorable. Cultural context shapes how tone is interpreted. In some cultures, a soft voice is seen as respectful and wise. In others, it might be mistaken for weakness unless paired with confident body language. Understanding the environment helps avoid misinterpretation. Regardless of culture, the universal element is control. A voice that is steady and intentional communicates authority without aggression. The way tone interacts with body language is important. A lowered voice paired with upright posture and steady eye contact reinforces confidence. If the body language is uncertain, shifting weight, avoiding eye contact, the effect of the voice weakens. Together, these nonverbal cues create a full picture of presence. The listener not only hears the confidence, but sees it. There are risks to overusing this technique. Speaking in a lower tone at all times can seem unnatural or even intimidating. The goal is flexibility. Adjusting tone to fit the situation shows emotional intelligence. In casual conversations, a lighter tone may be more appropriate. In serious moments, lowering the voice adds gravity. The shift itself carries meaning, showing that the speaker is attuned to the context. Even in silence, the memory of a voice can linger. People often recall not just what was said, but how it was said. A calm, deep voice leaves a lasting impression, shaping how others view the speaker long after the words have faded. This is why tone is such a powerful tool for leadership, influence, and connection. It weaves itself into every interaction, guiding the listener's perception without them realizing it. A lower voice tone is not about dominance for its own sake. It is about creating steadiness in a world full of noise. It reassures others while reinforcing the speaker's own sense of control. When used with care and intention, it becomes more than sound. It becomes a signal of confidence that shapes both the moment and the relationship that follows. Stillness carries a quiet strength that words cannot match. In a room filled with movement, the one who remains completely still draws attention without trying. Most people shift in their seats, tap their feet, or adjust their hands when they feel nervous or restless. These small movements signal uncertainty. When someone resists that urge and holds themselves steady, it creates a striking contrast. The absence of motion becomes a statement of control and power. The effect works because human beings are wired to notice movement. In nature, sudden motion meant danger, while stillness meant safety and dominance. Predators stayed perfectly still before striking, while prey twitched and shifted. This ancient instinct remains in modern life. A person who moves constantly appears uneasy, while a person who stays calm and motionless seems grounded and confident. Even if no one consciously thinks about it, a difference shapes how they respond. Imagine a high-stakes meeting where decisions will affect many people. Most of the participants are restless. Pens click, chairs squeak, and papers shuffle. In the middle of it all, one individual sits with perfect composure. Their hands rest naturally on the table, their shoulders steady, their gaze focused. As others speak, they do not nod excessively or shift in their seat. They listen without reaction, and when the room grows tense, their lack of movement becomes more noticeable. By the time they finally speak, every eye is on them. The stillness has built an invisible pressure, making their words seem more deliberate and important than the rest. Stillness does not mean stiffness. A rigid, frozen posture can look unnatural and forced. True stillness is relaxed, yet controlled. The muscles are at ease, but there is no wasted motion. This balance conveys comfort with the situation. It says, without a word, I am in control of myself, and nothing here threatens me. Others sense this and respond instinctively. Their own movements may slow as they match the calm energy in the room. This power becomes even clearer in situations where emotions run high. During an argument, most people gesture more, speak faster, and move erratically. Their bodies reveal their agitation. A person who remains still during such a moment stands apart. Their calm presence acts like a mirror, showing the other person how out of control they appear. The contrast can cause the angry party to pause, reconsider, and lower their intensity. The still person does not need to shout or interrupt. Their lack of reaction is enough to shift the dynamic. This same principle is used by skilled negotiators. During tense discussions, they resist the urge to fidget or fill silence with unnecessary words. They sit quietly, their movements slow and deliberate. This behavior creates discomfort for the other side. People often reveal too much when trying to break an uncomfortable silence. The negotiator's stillness gives them the upper hand, not through aggression, but through restraint. Each motion they do make, a slow lean forward, a deliberate hand gesture, carries more weight because it is rare and controlled. In leadership, stillness communicates stability. When a team faces uncertainty, they look to their leader for cues. If the leader paces, wrings their hands, or shifts constantly, the team absorbs that anxiety. If the leader remains composed and still, they project confidence. Even if challenges remain, the team feels reassured by that visible calm. It signals that someone is in control and prepared to guide them through difficult times. Consider a courtroom setting. Lawyers often speak passionately, pacing as they argue their cases. Jurors and spectators track their movements, but over time, the constant motion blends together. Then, a skilled attorney pauses completely, standing perfectly still as they deliver a key point. The sudden absence of movement draws every eye and ear. The silence around that moment makes the words resonate. The stillness itself becomes part of the argument, underlining the message more effectively than dramatic gestures ever could. The power of stillness also appears in personal interactions. In a conversation between friends or partners, one person may fidget when discussing something uncomfortable. They might play with their hands, glance around the room, or shift in their seat. If the other person remains calm and still, it creates a safe space. It signals that they are listening fully and not reacting with agitation. This steady presence encourages honesty and deeper sharing. It shows that even in difficult moments, the connection is stable. Stillness works because it contrasts with the natural human tendency to move when stressed. Most people are unaware of their small motions. They cross and uncross their arms, scratch their face, or adjust their position without realizing it. These unconscious signals reveal their internal state to others. A person who removes those signals by staying completely still hides their emotional landscape. This creates an air of mystery and control. Others may wonder what they are thinking, which adds to their influence. Practicing stillness takes effort. It requires awareness of the body and the discipline to resist small habits. Breathing plays a key role. Slow, deep breaths anchor the body and prevent twitching or jittery movements. Maintaining a relaxed but upright posture helps as well. The goal is not to freeze, but to rest naturally, like a stone in a stream while the water flows around it. This calm presence becomes a silent message of strength. Timing matters when using stillness deliberately. Holding steady at the right moment can amplify impact. For example, during a difficult question, a pause combined with complete stillness signals thoughtfulness. It shows that the response will be considered and measured. In contrast, fidgeting or rushing to answer suggests insecurity. The pause does not need to be long, just enough to let the weight of the moment settle before speaking. Stillness also enhances other nonverbal cues. A slight head tilt, a slow hand gesture, or a deliberate shift in posture becomes far more noticeable when surrounded by stillness. Because the body has been quiet, these small actions draw intense focus. In this way, movement becomes a tool rather than a reflex. Each motion carries meaning, like a single note in a silent room. Cultural expectations influence how stillness is perceived. In some cultures, animated gestures are a sign of warmth and engagement. In others, constant movement may seem careless or disrespectful. Understanding the norms of the environment helps use stillness effectively. Even in settings where motion is common, a moment of stillness can stand out as a mark of seriousness or authority. There is a balance between stillness and presence. Remaining completely still while avoiding eye contact or closing off the body can seem detached. Combining stillness with direct eye contact and open posture creates a powerful image of calm engagement. It shows focus without tension and authority without aggression. People naturally gravitate toward those who display this balance. In crowded or chaotic environments, stillness has an almost magnetic effect. When everyone else is in motion, the still figure becomes a point of stability. Others are drawn to it because it offers a sense of order amid disorder. This dynamic appears in everything from crisis situations to public speaking events. The one who remains steady becomes the anchor for everyone else. Stillness may seem like the absence of action, but it is a deliberate choice. By resisting the urge to fidget or react, a person signals mastery over themselves, and by extension, the situation. While others reveal their inner state through constant motion, the still individual remains a calm center. In that quiet presence, power speaks without a single word. Slow, deliberate movement carries a kind of weight that quick, jerky motions never achieve. When someone moves with intention, every gesture feels controlled and meaningful. It draws the eye and holds attention because it breaks the pattern of normal human behavior. Most people rush without realizing it. They reach for things too quickly, shift positions too often, and react immediately to what happens around them. Their movements reveal their inner state: nervous, distracted, eager, uncertain. When a person slows everything down, it signals something very different. It suggests that they are in complete control of themselves and, by extension, of the situation. The effect is strongest when others are moving normally. In a busy environment, most bodies blend into a blur of motion. Quick handshakes, rapid note-taking, constant fidgeting, these are all expected behaviors. Then, in the middle of it all, one person moves at half the speed of everyone else. They turn their heads slowly, place their hands carefully, and pause before making their next move. This contrast unsettles those around them. Without saying a word, they have claimed the center of attention. The stillness between their movements adds tension, like the quiet before a storm. Consider a professional setting where authority is at stake. A meeting begins with people speaking over one another and gesturing wildly to make their points. One individual remains calm, barely moving until it is their turn to speak. When they do move, it is with precision. A slow lean forward, a measured hand resting on the table, a deliberate look at each person in the room. The pace of their actions forces everyone else to match it. The chaotic energy fades because the slow, steady rhythm sets a new tone. Their movements are not just physical, but psychological, guiding the group toward their pace and control. This technique works because humans associate speed with anxiety. Quick movements signal fear or uncertainty. Slow, measured actions suggest confidence and dominance. In nature, predators often move this way. A lion does not rush at its prey until the exact right moment. Before that, it stalks slowly, silently, each step deliberate. That sense of control is what makes others uneasy. On a subconscious level, people recognize this same pattern in human interactions. Deliberate movements are especially powerful during negotiations. When someone slides a contract across the table too quickly, it reveals eagerness or desperation. When they place it slowly, letting the paper rest quietly before withdrawing their hand, it creates a completely different message. The pause gives weight to the act. It tells the other party, I am not in a hurry. I have time. You will move at my pace. This subtle signal can shift the balance of power, making the other side feel pressured without a single aggressive word being spoken. In high-stress situations, slowing down can de-escalate conflict while still asserting authority. Imagine two people arguing loudly. One is animated, arms flying, words tumbling out. The other remains calm, their voice low, their gestures minimal. When they finally move, a slow hand raised to signal pause or a steady step forward, the effect is immediate. The contrast forces the agitated person to adjust. It interrupts their rhythm and reminds them of who holds control. The slow movement does not just calm the scene, it dominates it. Even in everyday interactions, this principle has power. A handshake delivered too quickly feels rushed and forgettable. A handshake that is firm, unhurried, and precise leaves a stronger impression. Walking into a room at a measured pace conveys confidence before a single word is spoken. Picking up a coffee cup slowly, setting it down carefully, folding hands deliberately, all of these small actions add to a larger picture of control. The timing of slow movements is as important as the movements themselves. Moving too slowly at the wrong moment can feel theatrical or insincere. The goal is not to act like a statue, but to create balance. Most of the time, a normal pace is fine. Then, at key moments, slowing down slightly creates emphasis. For example, when delivering bad news, a leader might take a slow, deep breath before speaking. That pause signals gravity and thoughtfulness. When giving instructions, they might gesture slowly to show clarity and calm direction. Each movement reinforces the message being spoken. This approach requires self-awareness. Many people do not realize how quickly they move until they consciously try to slow down. Habits like tapping fingers, shifting weight, or darting eyes can undercut authority. Practicing deliberate motion means noticing these habits and replacing them with stillness or slow, intentional actions. Breathing helps here. Deep, controlled breaths naturally slow the body. When the breath is steady, movements follow. There is also a connection between slow movements and focus. When someone moves with intention, it shows they are fully present. Rushed actions suggest divided attention, as if the person is already thinking about the next task. Moving slowly sends the opposite message. I am here, in this moment, and nothing else matters right now. That level of focus draws respect. Others feel that their words and presence truly matter to the person who moves with such care. Cultural context influences how these signals are read. In some places, quick gestures are a sign of enthusiasm and warmth. In others, they are seen as frantic or careless. Slow movements, when done respectfully, are almost universally associated with seriousness and authority. Whether in a courtroom, a boardroom, or a family gathering, the person who takes their time commands the room without force. Slow movements also heighten the impact of sudden action. When someone has been calm and measured, a single sharp motion stands out dramatically. A quick turn of the head, a sudden gesture, or a fast step forward shocks the audience precisely because it breaks the established pattern. This tool is powerful, but must be used sparingly. Too much speed erases the contrast, while too little speed makes the moment predictable. Even silence interacts with slow movement. Imagine handing someone a document. Doing it quickly with constant chatter makes the exchange routine. Doing it slowly, without speaking, creates weight. The lack of words, combined with the deliberate pace, builds tension. The recipient feels the unspoken message. This matters. The same principle applies to eye contact, nods, or even standing up. When paired with slow motion, these signals grow stronger. In group dynamics, the pace of one person's movements can influence everyone else. If a leader moves slowly and calmly, the group tends to match that energy. Meetings become more focused. Decisions are made with care rather than haste. Conversely, if the leader is quick and frantic, the group mirrors that anxiety. The pace of movement becomes a silent form of leadership, shaping behavior without direct instruction. Slow, deliberate movement is not about intimidation alone. It is about creating presence. When every action has purpose, nothing feels wasted. The world moves quickly, and most people get swept up in that speed. The one who slows down stands apart. Others notice, even if they cannot explain why. They lean in, they watch more closely, and they feel the weight of each motion. In that quiet difference, power emerges, not from volume or force, but from the unspoken authority of moving at one's own pace. Silence can be one of the most powerful tools in a conversation. Most people rush to fill gaps between words, afraid of awkward pauses. They speak quickly, respond instantly, and leave no room for space. But when someone pauses before answering, even for just a few seconds, it changes the entire dynamic. The stillness creates a subtle pressure. The other person feels compelled to keep talking, often revealing more than they plan to share. What seems like a small delay becomes a strategy for understanding, influence, and control. The pause works because it disrupts expectations. In normal conversations, there is a rhythm. One person speaks, the other jumps in, and the exchange moves like a ping-pong match. When that rhythm breaks, it creates tension. The speaker begins to wonder why the listener has not responded. They start to question their own words, filling the silence with more explanation. This extra information often includes deeper feelings, unspoken concerns, or hidden motives. The listener gains insight without having to ask for it directly. Consider a manager speaking with an employee about a missed deadline. The employee explains the situation, listing reasons for the delay. Normally, the manager might respond right away with either criticism or reassurance. Instead, they remain silent for a few seconds, holding a neutral expression. The employee feels the weight of that silence and begins to speak again, this time revealing details about team struggles and miscommunication that were not mentioned before. By simply pausing, the manager uncovers the real problem without demanding it. This approach is also effective in negotiations. Imagine two parties sitting across a table discussing terms. One side makes an offer and waits for a response. If the other side replies instantly, they may give away too much about their priorities or level of urgency. If instead they pause, taking time to consider, the first side begins to feel uneasy. They might interpret the silence as dissatisfaction and rush to improve their offer, adding concessions or clarifications. The pause acts as a silent nudge, guiding the negotiation without a single word. The timing of the pause is important. It must feel natural, not forced. A pause that is too long can seem manipulative or make the other person shut down completely. The ideal length depends on the situation, but even 2 or 3 seconds can create the desired effect. During intense discussions, slightly longer pauses can signal deep thought and careful consideration. The key is to keep the body language calm and attentive. The pause should show engagement, not disinterest. Silence also has a calming effect in emotional situations. When someone is upset or angry, their words often come fast and heated. Responding too quickly can escalate the conflict. A deliberate pause creates space for emotions to settle. It signals that the listener is taking the words seriously rather than reacting impulsively. This gives both parties a moment to breathe and regain control. The conversation that follows is more likely to be constructive. In personal relationships, pausing before responding can strengthen trust. When a friend shares something vulnerable, an immediate reply might seem rushed or insincere. A brief silence shows that the listener is absorbing what was said. It gives weight to the moment and makes the friend feel truly heard. This kind of pause deepens connection because it shows respect for the speaker's feelings. The pause is equally valuable in leadership. A leader who answers questions too quickly can appear reactive or unprepared. By taking a moment before speaking, they project thoughtfulness and authority. Their words carry more impact because they seem considered rather than automatic. This builds confidence among their team and encourages careful thinking in return. In group settings, silence can shift the flow of conversation. When multiple people are talking, a pause stands out. If a facilitator waits quietly after someone finishes speaking, others often step in to fill the gap. They may offer new ideas or express doubts they had been holding back. This works especially well in brainstorming sessions or decision-making meetings. The silence draws out contributions that might otherwise remain hidden. There is also a psychological reason why pausing works. Humans are uncomfortable with uncertainty. When a response does not come immediately, the brain tries to resolve the tension. This often leads to oversharing or revealing inner thoughts. In this way, silence becomes a subtle form of influence. The listener does not need to push or probe. They simply create space, and the other person fills it. Practicing this skill requires patience. At first, holding a pause can feel awkward. The urge to jump in and speak is strong. Over time, it becomes easier to sit with the discomfort and use it strategically. Breathing helps. Taking one slow breath before responding provides a natural pause and keeps the tone calm. It also prevents unthinking reactions, allowing for more deliberate and effective words. This technique is not about manipulation. It is about listening fully and creating room for truth to emerge. People often carry layers of thought and emotion beneath their initial words. A quick reply skims the surface. A pause invites depth. It shows that the listener values what is being said enough to wait for the complete picture. Even outside serious conversations, pausing adds power to speech. In public speaking, a well-placed pause draws the audience in. It gives them time to process the message and builds anticipation for what comes next. Skilled speakers use silence as carefully as their words. A pause before a key point can make it land with greater force. A pause after a question can encourage reflection. In everyday life, this practice can change interactions in subtle ways. During casual conversations, it signals attentiveness. In tense moments, it diffuses conflict. In decision-making, it creates clarity. The effect is quiet but profound. By resisting the urge to rush, the listener shapes the flow of dialogue and gains a deeper understanding of those around them. The power of pausing lies not just in what is withheld, but in what it allows others to reveal. In the space between words, people often share their true feelings, hopes, and fears. A well-timed silence can uncover more than direct questioning ever could. It is a reminder that sometimes the most effective thing to say is nothing at all. Silence can feel louder than words when it is paired with stillness and a fixed gaze. Most people are used to constant movement and conversation. They expect a back-and-forth rhythm in their interactions, a steady flow of words and gestures that keeps everyone comfortable. When someone breaks that rhythm by standing completely still and staring, it creates a different kind of atmosphere. The lack of motion feels unnatural, even unsettling. It draws attention to the one who remains quiet, and it builds tension in the space between them and everyone else. This effect comes from deep instincts. Humans are wired to notice eyes and movement because, in the past, survival depended on it. A motionless figure staring directly at someone would have been a signal of danger, dominance, or challenge. Those same instincts still live in modern behavior. When a person stands silent and unmoving, holding their gaze, others feel that old primal discomfort. They want to do something, speak, move, look away, just to release the pressure. Imagine a workplace setting where a manager addresses a team after a major mistake. Instead of launching into a speech or reprimand, the manager simply stands in front of the group, perfectly still, looking at each person in turn. The room grows quiet. At first, people glance back, unsure of what is happening. A few seconds pass, and the silence becomes heavy. Someone clears their throat. Another person shifts in their chair. Eventually, someone blurts out an explanation or apology just to fill the void. The manager has not spoken a single word, yet they have gained control of the situation through silence and presence alone. This tactic works because it rehearses the normal flow of communication. In most conversations, people rush to respond, afraid of awkward pauses. They speak quickly to keep things moving and to avoid discomfort. When one person refuses to play that game, it throws everyone else off balance. The motionless stare acts like a wall. The others must either confront it or retreat. Most choose to confront it by speaking first, revealing their thoughts or feelings in the process. The power of this approach lies in its restraint. It is easy to dominate a conversation by shouting or gesturing wildly, but that kind of control is loud and obvious. Quiet dominance is far more unsettling because it forces others to confront themselves. The stillness becomes a mirror, reflecting their own nervousness back at them. The longer it continues, the more intense it feels. Consider a negotiation where one side presents their terms and then sits back, silent and unmoving. The other side expects immediate feedback, a counteroffer, a question, anything to keep the process going. Instead, they are met with a calm, steady stare. Seconds stretch into what feels like minutes. The silence grows unbearable. To break it, someone on the other side speaks again, often offering concessions or clarifications they had not planned to give. The quiet party gains leverage without lifting a finger. This technique also works on a personal level. In a disagreement between friends or family members, emotions can run high. Most people respond by raising their voices or repeating their points, trying to be heard over the noise. A different approach is to stop moving, stop speaking, and simply look at the other person. At first, they may keep talking, but as they notice the lack of response, they begin to falter. The stillness forces them to reflect on their own words. Often, they will slow down or even apologize, realizing they are the only one escalating the conflict. The key to making this work is complete control. The body must be relaxed but firm, not stiff or forced. Any small fidget, tapping a foot, shifting weight, glancing around, weaken the effect. The gaze should be steady but not exaggerated. A natural, unwavering look is enough. It should not be a glare or a squint, just calm focus. This balance prevents the stare from becoming theatrical or cartoonish. It feels real because it is natural. Timing matters as well. Standing silently and staring for too long can cross into aggression or intimidation. The goal is not to frighten others, but to create space where they reveal themselves. Once they begin speaking, the silent person can then respond calmly, keeping the interaction under control. The stare is a tool, not a weapon. It is most effective when used sparingly and with purpose. The psychological effect of this technique is profound. Most people cannot handle extended silence in a face-to-face interaction. It feels like unfinished business, like a question left hanging in the air. The human mind craves closure. When it does not come, anxiety rises. That anxiety drives action. Someone will eventually speak or move just to end the tension. The person who remains still gains insight by watching how others react. This approach appears in many professional settings without people even realizing it. In interviews, for example, skilled interviewers often ask a difficult question and then remain silent, simply looking at the candidate. The candidate, uncomfortable with the quiet, begins to fill it with extra details. They reveal thoughts or weaknesses they might have kept hidden if the interviewer had spoken too soon. The silence becomes a subtle form of truth-seeking. In leadership, a quiet, motionless presence can inspire respect. A leader who does not rush to speak shows that they are considering everything carefully. Their stillness signals stability, especially in chaotic situations. Team members feel both uneasy and reassured, knowing that the leader will act when ready, but will not be pushed into hasty decisions. This kind of calm authority often speaks louder than a passionate speech ever could. Cultural context plays a role in how this behavior is perceived. In some places, direct eye contact is seen as a sign of honesty and confidence. In others, it may be considered rude or aggressive. The amount of silence people are comfortable with also varies. Understanding these differences is important for using this technique effectively. What feels powerful in one setting might feel threatening in another. The technique also relies on physical positioning. Standing at a slight distance creates space for observation without crowding the other person. Being too close can make the silence feel hostile. Being too far away can make it feel detached. The right balance allows the stare to hold weight without overwhelming. A neutral posture, with arms at the sides and feet firmly planted, adds to the impression of control. When used well, this method changes the pace of interaction. Instead of rushing through words and gestures, the silence stretches time. Seconds feel longer, and every movement gains meaning. The still person appears larger, more significant, simply because they are not competing for attention. Others give it to them freely, desperate to understand what the silence needs. The effect lingers even after the moment passes. People remember how it felt to be under that quiet gaze. They may not recall the exact words spoken later, but they will recall the feeling of being held in place by someone who needed no noise or motion to command the room. This memory influences future interactions, shaping how they behave around that person. Standing quietly and staring seems simple, yet it requires discipline. It is tempting to speak, to gesture, to break the silence first. Resisting that urge takes strength. The one who holds their ground gains an invisible advantage, not through force or volume, but through the subtle power of presence. In a world where everyone rushes to fill space, the person who claims it with stillness controls the outcome. Conversations follow a rhythm. People speak, others listen, and responses come in predictable patterns. Most people finish their thoughts completely, wrapping up sentences neatly so there is no confusion about what was meant. When someone suddenly stops speaking mid-thought, it disrupts that rhythm. The silence that follows feels strange and uncomfortable. The listener feels the need to step in, to complete the thought or to guess at what was about to be said. In doing so, they often reveal more than they intended. This works because the human brain dislikes open loops. When a statement is left unfinished, it creates tension. The listener wants closure, an answer to the unspoken part. That desire to resolve the gap pushes them to act. They might blurt out their own ideas, correct assumptions, or share hidden feelings. The speaker, by saying less, actually gains more. Imagine a manager speaking with an employee about a project that didn't go well. Instead of saying, "The client wasn't happy because the report was late," the manager stops halfway. "The client wasn't happy because," and then lets the words hang. The silence stretches. The employee, unable to stand it, rushes to fill the space. They might admit, "Because I didn't check the final numbers," or "because we missed the original deadline." By leaving the sentence open, the manager has encouraged the employee to volunteer information without demanding it. This technique is subtle and powerful. It relies on timing and tone. The incomplete sentence must sound natural, not staged. If it feels like a trick, the other person will notice and shut down. When done smoothly, it seems like a simple pause, as though the speaker expected the listener to already know what comes next. This invites participation instead of resistance. The listener believes they are helping, when in reality, they are revealing their own thoughts. In negotiations, ending sentences incomplete can shift the balance of power. Picture two parties discussing a deal. One side says, "We were prepared to offer more, but," and then stops. The other side leans forward, eager to fill in the missing piece. They might say, "But you're concerned about timing," or "But you need guarantees." In doing so, they expose their priorities and fears. The first party now has valuable information they never had to ask for directly. The effect is even stronger when emotions are involved. In a personal argument, people often defend themselves automatically. If one person says, "You always get upset when I," and then leaves the sentence unfinished, the other person feels compelled to respond. They may reveal exactly what triggers their anger or explain their feelings in detail. The incomplete thought pulls the truth out like a magnet. This works because silence is hard to sit with, especially when paired with an unfinished idea. The listener's imagination races to fill the blank space. The longer the pause, the more pressure builds. At first, they may wait, expecting the speaker to continue. When that continuation never comes, they feel an almost physical need to speak. The words they choose are often unfiltered and revealing. This technique can also expose hidden motives in professional settings. During an interview, a hiring manager might say, "We've had some challenges with turnover because," and then stop. The candidate, eager to impress, might rush to suggest solutions or guess at the reasons. They might say, "Because employees feel underpaid," or "Because the workload is too heavy." Each guess provides insight into the candidate's thinking and reveals what they consider important. The manager gains valuable information without asking direct questions. The key to using this strategy well is restraint. If every sentence is left incomplete, it becomes obvious and irritating. It should be used sparingly, at moments when the missing piece is likely to matter. The timing must be precise. Ending too soon creates confusion. Ending too late loses the effect. The ideal moment is right before the crucial detail, when the listener is leaning in, ready to hear the next word. Body language plays an important role. A calm, neutral expression keeps the interaction comfortable. If conversations follow a rhythm, people speak, others listen, and responses come in predictable patterns. Most people finish their thoughts completely, wrapping up sentences neatly so there is no confusion about what was meant. When someone suddenly stops speaking mid-thought, it disrupts that rhythm. The silence that follows feels strange and uncomfortable. The listener feels the need to step in, to complete the thought or to guess at what was about to be said. In doing so, they often reveal more than they intended. This works because the human brain dislikes open loops. When a statement is left unfinished, it creates tension. The listener wants closure, an answer to the unspoken part. That desire to resolve the gap pushes them to act. They might blurt out their own ideas, correct assumptions, or share hidden feelings. The speaker, by saying less, actually gains more. Imagine a manager speaking with an employee about a project that didn't go well. Instead of saying, "The client wasn't happy because the report was late," the manager stops halfway. "The client wasn't happy because," and then lets the words hang. The silence stretches. The employee, unable to stand it, rushes to fill the space. They might admit, "Because I didn't check the final numbers," or "Because we missed the original deadline." By leaving the sentence open, the manager has encouraged the employee to volunteer information without demanding it. This technique is subtle and powerful. It relies on timing and tone. The incomplete sentence must sound natural, not staged. If it feels like a trick, the other person will notice and shut down. When done smoothly, it seems like a simple pause, as though the speaker expected the listener to already know what comes next. This invites participation instead of resistance. The listener believes they are helping, when in reality, they are revealing their own thoughts. In negotiations, ending sentences incomplete can shift the balance of power. Picture two parties discussing a deal. One side says, "We were prepared to offer more, but," and then stops. The other side leans forward, eager to fill in the missing piece. They might say, "But you're concerned about timing," or, "But you need guarantees." In doing so, they expose their priorities and fears. The first party now has valuable information they never had to ask for directly. The effect is even stronger when emotions are involved. In a personal argument, people often defend themselves automatically. If one person says, "You always get upset when I," and then leaves the sentence unfinished, the other person feels compelled to respond. They may reveal exactly what triggers their anger or explain their feelings in detail. The incomplete thought pulls the truth out like a magnet. This works because silence is hard to sit with, especially when paired with an unfinished idea. The listener's imagination races to fill the blank space. The longer the pause, the more pressure builds. At first, they may wait, expecting the speaker to continue. When that continuation never comes, they feel an almost physical need to speak. The words they choose are often unfiltered and revealing. This technique can also expose hidden motives in professional settings. During an interview, a hiring manager might say, "We've had some challenges with turnover because," and then stop. Conversations usually have a steady rhythm. People speak, others respond, and the flow continues without interruption. When someone suddenly goes quiet in the middle of this rhythm, everything changes. The shift feels unnatural, even uncomfortable. The absence of sound draws more attention than any words could. It unsettles the group and makes everyone present reconsider what has just been said. Sudden silence acts like a mirror, forcing people to reflect on their own words and choices. The effect is powerful because silence is rare. Most people rush to fill space with speech, even if they have nothing meaningful to add. They fear awkward pauses and scramble to keep the interaction moving. When someone breaks this pattern by going silent, the others feel exposed. The lack of response creates tension, and that tension pushes them to think more carefully. They start questioning their own statements, wondering if they said something wrong or revealed too much. Imagine a team meeting where several people are arguing about how to handle a difficult client. Voices rise, ideas clash, and everyone talks at once. Then, one person stops talking completely. They fold their hands, sit back, and say nothing. At first, no one notices, but as the quiet stretches, others begin to glance toward them. The silence becomes louder than the shouting. Gradually, the volume drops. People start second-guessing their arguments. Some begin to restate their points in softer tones. The sudden quiet has shifted the energy of the entire room without a single word. This happens because humans naturally seek balance. In a noisy, chaotic setting, silence stands out like a spotlight. It forces others to slow down and pay attention. Even those who are not directly involved in the discussion feel the change. The atmosphere grows heavy, and everyone begins to wonder what the silent person is thinking. That uncertainty can be more influential than any direct statement. In negotiations, this tactic can be especially effective. Consider two parties discussing terms. One side makes a proposal and expects an immediate reaction. Instead, the other side goes completely quiet. They do not nod, frown, or shift in their seat. They simply wait. The first side becomes anxious. Did they ask for too much? Did they reveal a weakness? In an attempt to break the tension, they start talking again, often lowering their demands or offering additional details. The silence works like gravity, pulling out information and concessions without effort. This type of quiet is not passive. It requires deliberate control. The person who goes silent must maintain steady body language. A calm posture and composed expression show that the silence is intentional, not accidental. If they fidget or glance around nervously, the effect disappears. The goal is to project strength and patience. Others must feel that the silence comes from confidence, not fear. Timing matters. If someone goes quiet at the wrong moment, it may seem like they are confused or unprepared. The silence must come after a key statement or turning point, when the impact will be strongest. For example, a leader addressing their team might speak clearly about expectations, then suddenly stop after saying, "We can't afford another mistake like this." The abrupt end makes everyone in the room reflect on the seriousness of the message. The silence gives it weight. This technique also works on a personal level. In everyday arguments, people often speak without thinking, driven by emotion. If one person suddenly stops talking, the other is forced to confront their own words. The quiet moment breaks the momentum of the conflict. The angry person may feel embarrassed or reconsider what they've said. The pause creates space for reflection, which can lead to resolution. Consider a conversation between two friends. One is venting frustration and speaking rapidly. The other listens patiently, and then, at a critical moment, falls completely silent. The first friend notices the change. Their voice falters as they realize they might be going too far. Without being told to stop, the silence changes the gap. Take deep breaths and relax into the room. You will find this deep silence every day, a nourising part of your sleep. Your calm posture is a safe bed of light, heavy moment, and you will be well soon. They slow down and start to reflect. The silence communicates concern and boundary more effectively than an argument would. Group dynamics amplify this effect. In a room full of people, one person's silence stands out even more. Imagine a board meeting where heated debates are common. Everyone expects noise, fast responses, and constant movement. Then a key decision maker stops speaking and remains quiet. Slowly, the rest of the group becomes aware of it. Attention shifts toward the silent figure. The others begin to self-correct, softening their tone and reconsidering their words. The quiet person now holds the center of the discussion, without having to compete for it. Silence works because it disrupts expectations. People expect words to follow words. When that chain is broken, the mind races to fill the gap. In that moment of uncertainty, people often reveal their true thoughts. They may speak to justify themselves, to clarify, or simply to escape the discomfort. The one who remains quiet gathers valuable insight while giving away nothing. The technique can also highlight the weight of certain ideas. When a statement is followed by silence, it lingers longer in the mind. For example, a coach speaking to their team might say, "This is our last chance to prove ourselves," and then stop talking. The stillness that follows gives everyone time to absorb the message. If the coach kept speaking, the words would be diluted by noise. The silence sharpens their impact. In some situations, silence can even reveal guilt or dishonesty. During an interrogation or serious conversation, a sudden quiet moment can make the other person anxious. They may rush to fill the void, revealing details they never intended to share. Their own discomfort drives them to speak, while the silent person remains in control. Cultural context influences how this is perceived. In some cultures, silence is a sign of respect and thoughtfulness. In others, it can feel confrontational or strange. Understanding the norms of the group helps prevent misunderstandings. Even so, unexpected quietness usually has some effect, no matter the setting. Humans everywhere are sensitive to changes in rhythm and pace. There are risks to using this tactic poorly. If the silence drags on too long, it can seem like disengagement. People might assume the quiet person has nothing to offer. The key is balance. The silence should last just long enough to create tension, but not so long that it becomes awkward beyond repair. A few seconds are often enough to achieve the desired result. In practice, sudden silence is like a reset button. It stops the flow of words and gives everyone a chance to think. It slows down impulsive reactions and brings hidden thoughts to the surface. The quiet person gains an advantage because they control the tempo of the conversation. Others follow their lead without realizing it. When used with care, this technique transforms discussions. It turns noise into focus and reveals truths that would stay hidden in constant chatter. The shift from sound to silence feels dramatic, even when it lasts only a moment. In that still space, people begin to see their words more clearly, and sometimes they wish they had chosen them more carefully. Most conversations have an unspoken agreement. Two people start speaking, and both expect to stay until the exchange reaches some natural end. Even as the talk is short, there's usually a polite signal, a handshake, a nod, or a closing remark that marks the finish. When one person breaks this pattern by walking away in the middle of a conversation, it shatters the rhythm and leaves the other person unsettled. The sudden exit creates a space that feels unfinished. A gap filled with questions, doubts, and unease. This reaction happens because humans crave closure. When a discussion stops abruptly, the brain scrambles to make sense of it. Was something offensive said? Did the person hear something they didn't like? Did they lose interest? The mind spins through possibilities, replaying the last words spoken, searching for clues. The person left behind often feels compelled to analyze their own behavior and words. That lingering anxiety gives the one who walked away a quiet form of control without having to raise their voice or argue. Consider a workplace example. A team is discussing a project, and tensions are high. Ideas clash, and voices grow sharper. In the middle of this, a manager listens calmly, says nothing, then rises from their chair and leaves the room without explanation. At first, the group freezes. A few people glance at each other, unsure of what just happened. Then the talking starts again, but now it has changed. Some defend their positions more carefully. Others begin second-guessing what they said, wondering if they crossed a line. The manager's absence fills the room more than their presence ever did. By walking away, they have shifted the tone of the entire meeting. This works because people expect immediate responses. In heated discussions, they look for reactions, agreement, disagreement, even just acknowledgement. When no response comes, the pressure builds. A sudden departure amplifies that pressure. It's not just silence, it's motion. The act of physically leaving sends a clear signal. Something significant just happened, but the meaning is left for others to figure out. Negotiators sometimes use this technique. During tough bargaining, one side might stand up and walk out without warning. The other side is left sitting at the table, unsure if the deal has collapsed or if the move is a tactic. In that uncertainty, they often make quick decisions to keep the negotiation alive. They may soften their demands, reveal extra information, or rush to call the other party back. The one who left controls the pace, forcing others to react rather than act. The timing of walking away is crucial. If it happens too early, before anything meaningful has been said, it can seem like disinterest or rudeness. Too late, and it loses its impact. The most powerful moment is right after a key statement or emotional exchange. Leaving then freezes the moment in place. The other person is left replaying the last words over and over, trying to understand what they meant. Imagine a personal relationship where two people are discussing a sensitive topic. Emotions rise, and one person says, "I just don't know how much more of this I can take." Instead of explaining further, they stand and leave the room. The partner left behind sits in silence, heart pounding. The conversation is unfinished, but there is no chance to resolve it yet. All they can do is think about what was said and what might come next. The person who walked away has not only ended the discussion, but has also taken control of it, leaving the other to stew in uncertainty. Body language plays an important role in making this tactic effective. The departure must appear intentional and calm, not frantic or panicked. A slow, steady movement signals control. The person rises smoothly, perhaps gathers their things, and exits without a backward glance. If they slam doors or storm off, the message changes. It becomes about anger rather than authority. The goal is to leave others wondering, not to show loss of temper. This technique works because it denies others the resolution they seek. In everyday interactions, closure comes through words. "I see what you mean," or "let's continue later." Even a simple goodbye provides an endpoint. Walking away mid-conversation erases that comfort. It leaves the narrative open, like a story with the last page torn out. The human mind cannot resist trying to complete the story on its own, which often leads to overthinking and self-revelation. In group settings, the effect is magnified. Imagine a company town hall meeting where employees are raising concerns. The leader listens quietly, nods occasionally, then stands and leaves halfway through without explanation. The room falls silent. People look at one another, unsure if they said something wrong or if a major decision is about to be made. In the hours that follow, rumors swirl. Everyone fills in the blanks with their own fears or hopes. The leader has spoken few words, but has still guided the entire conversation. Walking away can also be used to de-escalate conflict while keeping the upper hand. In a heated argument, staying and shouting back often escalates matters. Simply leaving sends a different kind of message. It signals that the person will not waste energy on chaos. The quiet withdrawal forces the other side to confront their own behavior. Often, they are left feeling foolish, their anger echoing in the empty space. There is a delicate balance to this tactic. It must not become a habit. If someone always walks away, others may stop caring or may see it as avoidance. The power comes from rarity. When used sparingly, it creates an unforgettable moment. The abruptness makes it stand out, and people remember it long after the event itself has passed. Cultural norms also play a role. In some settings, leaving without explanation is seen as deeply disrespectful. In others, it may be understood as a sign of serious reflection or decision-making. Knowing the environment ensures that the action is interpreted correctly. The goal is not to humiliate, but to create thoughtful tension. Sometimes, walking away is less about strategy and more about timing. A parent might leave a conversation with a teenager at the exact moment before it turns into a shouting match. A lawyer might walk out of a deposition to signal that a boundary has been crossed. A leader might exit a negotiation to show that their position is final. In each case, the sudden absence speaks louder than words. The impact continues even after the moment ends. The people left behind replay the scene in their minds. They wonder what the departure meant, what could have been done differently, and what might happen next. This reflection often changes their behavior, making them more cautious, more open, or more eager to please in future interactions. The person who walked away has planted a seed that grows in silence. Walking away mid-conversation is not about being dramatic. It is about using absence as a form of communication. When done with calm purpose, it creates a lingering echo. The empty space left behind becomes a powerful tool, shaping thoughts and actions long after footsteps have faded from the room. Conversations are shaped by the questions people ask. When a question is clear and specific, it guides the answer in a direct line. The person responding knows exactly what is being asked and usually gives only the information needed to satisfy it. But when a question is vague, the path opens wide. The listener has to guess what the other person really wants to know. in trying to cover all possibilities, they often reveal far more than they intended. This extra information slips out naturally because they are filling in blanks that were never actually there. Vague questions work because they create uncertainty. Most people are uncomfortable with unclear situations. They rush to close the gap by providing context and explanation. The silence between what is asked and what is understood drives them to keep talking. The less detail the questioner gives, the more the other person feels they must supply. It is a subtle shift in control. The one asking speaks little, while the one answering does all the work. Imagine a manager speaking to an employee about a project. Instead of saying, "Why did you miss the deadline for the report?" the manager simply asks, "So, what happened with the report?" The question is open, undefined. The employee has to decide what part to focus on. They might start by explaining the late submission, then add details about team problems, resource shortages, or personal stress. The manager learns far more than they would have with a direct question. The vagueness encourages the employee to paint the entire picture rather than just the piece they were asked about. This technique is common in investigations and negotiations. A skilled investigator knows that if they asked a person, "Where were you last night between 8 and 10 p.m.?" the person can answer narrowly, "I was at home." Just listen to what starts and ends accordingly. But if the investigator says, "Tell me about your evening," the response is usually longer and more revealing. The speaker begins to share a timeline, often adding small details that can later be checked or challenged. These details might include who they spoke with, what they ate, or how they felt. In their effort to be thorough, they provide openings for further questions. The power of vague questions lies in how natural they seem. The person being questioned does not feel trapped or pressured. In fact, they may feel relieved that the question is not direct or confrontational. They believe they are in control because they are the ones doing most of the talking. What they do not realize is that their own words are giving away information piece by piece. Consider a social example. At a family gathering, someone suspects a relative is hiding a big change, like a new job or a move to another city. Asking, "Did you get a new job?" might lead to a simple yes or no. Instead, asking, "So how are things going these days?" leaves the field open. The relative might start talking about work, their frustrations, their plans, and, eventually, the very news they were trying to keep private. The vague question creates space for them to reveal it voluntarily. Vague questions can also be used in leadership to understand team dynamics. A leader who says, "What's the problem with this project?" may get defensive answers. People will frame their response to protect themselves or others. But if the leader simply asks, "How's the project coming along?" the team members may let down their guard. They could start talking about delays, misunderstandings, or even conflicts, thinking they are just giving an update. The leader gains insight without having to push for it. The tone of voice matters when using this technique. A vague question should sound casual, even curious. If it is asked too sharply, it feels like a trap. A calm, even tone invites openness. The questioner appears neutral, as if they are simply listening. This helps the other person relax and share freely. Body language plays a role as well. Open posture, steady eye contact, and occasional nods signal interest without judgment. The person answering feels safe to keep talking. If the questioner looks impatient or suspicious, the effect is ruined. The goal is to make the silence after the vague question feel like an invitation, not a demand. Timing is crucial. The vague question works best at the right moment, often after the other person has said something worth exploring. For instance, if someone mentions they had a busy weekend, jumping in with "busy how" is too direct. Simply saying, "Oh, a busy weekend?" with a pause encourages them to elaborate. They will likely explain what happened, adding details they were not planning to share. This method is especially effective when dealing with people who are guarded or private. A direct question makes them defensive. They prepare short, careful answers. A vague question, on the other hand, feels harmless. It lowers their defenses. They may even forget they are revealing sensitive information because they are speaking freely and filling in gaps on their own. In negotiations, vague questions can turn the tide. Imagine two companies discussing a potential partnership. One side wants to know how desperate the other is for a deal. Asking, "How badly do you need this contract?" would never work. The other side would deny any urgency, but asking, "So, what are your main priorities right now?" leaves room for them to reveal their situation. As they explain their goals, pressures, and timeline, their level of need becomes clear without ever being directly stated. Vague questions also have a way of drawing out hidden emotions. People often reveal feelings indirectly when they are trying to explain themselves. Asking, "How did that make you feel?" puts them on the spot. They might answer with a single word, "Fine." But asking, "What's been on your mind about that?" encourages a longer response. They might talk about events, reactions, and worries, revealing their true emotions through storytelling rather than labels. There is a risk to using vague questions too often. If every question is unclear, the other person may become confused or frustrated. They might feel like the conversation has no direction. The key is balance. A few well-placed vague questions create openings, while more direct questions provide structure. Together, they guide the discussion without making the other person defensive. Even in casual conversations, this technique can deepen connection. Friends who always ask specific questions like, "Did you like the movie?" get predictable answers. A vague alternative like, "So what did you think?" invites a richer response. The friend might talk about the plot, the acting, or how the film reminded them of something personal. The openness of the question makes the conversation more meaningful. The strength of vague questions lies in their simplicity. They seem harmless, even ordinary, but they shift the burden of detail onto the other person. While the questioner remains quiet, the speaker keeps adding layers of information, trying to be understood. By the time they finish, they may have revealed far more than they planned. The power is in the space between words, the gap that people cannot resist filling. A single facial expression can change the course of a conversation without a single word being spoken. Most people are deeply sensitive to how others react to them, especially when they are explaining something. When someone listens with a calm, neutral face, the speaker feels comfortable staying on track. But when the listener shows even the slightest sign of confusion, everything shifts. The speaker's natural instinct is to clarify, to explain more, to fill in any gaps. A puzzled look taps into this instinct and draws out extra details that might never have surfaced otherwise. Humans are wired to seek understanding. From childhood, people learn to read faces to know if their message is landing. A nod encourages them to continue, a smile reassures them, and a frown warns them something is wrong. Among these signals, confusion is especially powerful. It sends a subtle message: "I don't fully understand what you mean." Most speakers cannot resist responding to that signal. They start talking more, often repeating themselves, adding context, and revealing information they were not originally planning to share. Imagine a meeting between two coworkers. One is describing a new process that has been causing delays. They explain the steps, but the other person tilts their head slightly, furrows their brow, and narrows their eyes just enough to show uncertainty. The speaker notices and immediately reacts. "Well, let me explain it better," they say, launching into a more detailed description. In their effort to clarify, they include timelines, specific names, and even frustrations they hadn't mentioned before. The confused look has unlocked deeper layers of information without a single question being asked. This works because silence alone can be ambiguous. A blank face could mean agreement, disinterest, or even judgment. A puzzled expression, on the other hand, directs the speaker's energy. It gives them a problem to solve, helping the listener understand. People are wired to seek that moment of connection, so they work harder to make their point clear. In doing so, they often reveal not just facts, but feelings, assumptions, and motivations. The effect is especially strong in sensitive situations where people are careful about what they say. Consider a negotiation. One party lays out their terms, careful to speak in generalities. The other party listens quietly, then allows a look of confusion to spread across their face. They don't interrupt or challenge. They simply appear as though something isn't adding up. The first party senses this and begins to explain further. They start revealing details about deadlines, internal pressures, and bottom lines. They believe they are clarifying, but in reality, they are giving away valuable information. The confused look acts as a silent lever, drawing out insights that direct questioning might never uncover. Tone and timing matter. A puzzled look must be subtle. If it is exaggerated, it comes across as sarcasm or mockery. The goal is to show just enough uncertainty to prompt a reaction, not to provoke defensiveness. A slight tilt of the head, a brief narrowing of the eyes, a faint crease between the brows. These small adjustments signal curiosity rather than confrontation. The speaker should feel encouraged to elaborate, not attacked. There is an art to holding the expression. Too brief, and the moment passes unnoticed. Too long, and it begins to feel forced or awkward. The best approach is to let the confusion appear naturally as the speaker talks, then soften it once they begin to clarify. This rise and fall creates a natural rhythm. The speaker feels they are succeeding in explaining themselves, which motivates them to keep going. In personal relationships, this technique can reveal unspoken truths. Imagine two friends discussing plans. One says, "I just have a lot going on right now." Instead of pressing with direct questions, the other friend raises their eyebrows slightly and lets their expression show mild puzzlement. The first friend senses the reaction and rushes to fill the silence. "I mean, work has been rough, and my family keeps calling me about this thing, and..." Before they know it, they've shared the real reasons behind their vague statement. The confused look works because it feels non-threatening. It gives the other person the freedom to open up without feeling interrogated. Leaders often use this in group settings. A team member gives a status update, glossing over a potential problem. The leader doesn't interrupt. They simply lean back, tilt their head, and let a hint of confusion show. The rest of the team notices too. The speaker, sensing the unspoken question, begins to add detail. "Well, what I mean is that the timeline has shifted because of the vendor delays, and..." By the time they finish, the issue is clear to everyone in the room. The leader has guided the conversation without uttering a single word. This approach is also valuable in teaching or mentoring. A student presents an idea with confidence. Instead of immediately correcting errors, the teacher lets a puzzled expression linger. The student, eager to prove their point, explains more thoroughly. In doing so, they often recognize their own mistakes. The confusion acts as a mirror, reflecting gaps in understanding without direct criticism. This builds self-awareness while preserving trust. The power of a confused look lies in its subtlety. It creates a space where the speaker takes on the work of explaining. Most people are deeply uncomfortable leaving that space empty. They rush to fill it, speaking faster, adding details, and exposing what lies beneath their initial statement. Even guarded individuals struggle to resist. The need to be understood is stronger than the desire to stay silent. Consider a real-world example from customer service. A client calls to complain about an issue, but keeps their tone polite and professional. The representative listens quietly, then adds a faint expression of confusion to their face as they speak. "I see," they might say softly, while letting their brow crease slightly. The client picks up on it and begins to elaborate, dropping their careful tone. They reveal frustrations, internal company policies, and even threats to take their business elsewhere. The representative gains a complete picture of the problem without asking direct, potentially confrontational questions. Body language around the confused look must remain calm and open. Crossing arms, tapping fingers, or leaning back too far can make the speaker feel judged. Instead, a slight forward lean and relaxed posture signal engagement. The combination of curiosity and attentiveness draws the speaker closer. It says without words, "I want to understand, help me." This invitation makes the other person more willing to share. Cultural differences play a role in how this signal is received. In some places, showing confusion openly is seen as a sign of humility and learning. In others, it might be taken as a challenge or insult. Understanding the social context ensures the expression is interpreted correctly. The safest version is always mild and respectful, hinting at curiosity rather than doubt. The confused look works best when paired with silence. After showing the expression, the listener should resist the urge to immediately speak or ask follow-up questions. The pause creates space for the other person to step in and explain. This moment of quiet is often when the most revealing words emerge. People cannot stand a gap between their message and its understanding. They will work to close that gap themselves, often saying more than they planned. Over time, this technique builds trust as well as insight. Because the listener isn't attacking or accusing, the speaker feels safe. They believe they are helping, not defending. The more they clarify, the more open they become. What began as a simple conversation deepens into honest sharing, all sparked by a small, silent signal of uncertainty. In a world where words are constant, a single look can uncover truths that questions never could. People are more likely to say yes when the request feels small and harmless. A tiny favor seems easy to grant, almost automatic. It requires little thought and almost no risk. Once someone agrees to that first favor, something shifts inside them. They begin to see themselves as the kind of person who helps, who cooperates, who supports the other person. When a bigger request comes later, saying no feels harder. This is the quiet power of starting small, a technique that works not because of pressure, but because of consistency. Consider a neighbor who wants help painting a fence. If they knock on the door and immediately ask for a full day of labor, the answer will likely be no. It's too big, too sudden. But if they start by asking, "Could you lend me a brush for a moment?" the favor feels insignificant. It costs almost nothing. The neighbor agrees without hesitation. A few minutes later, the request grows. "While you're here, could you help me hold this board in place?" The second favor is only slightly larger than the first, so it feels natural to agree. By the time the neighbor asks for help painting the entire fence, the person already sees themselves as involved in the project. Refusing now feels like breaking an unspoken promise. This gradual build works because humans like to see their actions as consistent with their identity. Once someone has taken a small step in a certain direction, their mind begins to align with that path. If they helped once, they must be helpful. If they supported a cause in a small way, they must believe in that cause. Saying no later creates inner conflict, while saying yes restores harmony. The process feels voluntary, even when it is guided by careful planning. In business, this technique appears often in sales. A representative might first ask a customer to sign up for a free trial. The trial seems risk-free and simple. Once the customer has used the product, they feel a sense of ownership. When the representative later asks for a paid subscription, the customer is more likely to agree. The initial yes paves the way for the larger commitment. The same pattern plays out with donations. A charity might start by asking someone to sign a petition or share a post online. These are small actions, easy to complete. Later, when the charity asks for a financial contribution, the person feels more invested and more likely to give. The steps must be carefully chosen. If the first favor feels too trivial, it may not create a sense of involvement. If it feels too demanding, it may create resistance. The ideal starting point is a request that requires some effort but little sacrifice. It should be easy to agree to, while still establishing a pattern of cooperation. Once that pattern is in place, the next step can be slightly larger, then larger still, until the ultimate goal is reached. Imagine a team leader who needs a volunteer for a difficult assignment. Asking outright might lead to refusal. Instead, the leader begins small. "Could you take a quick look at this report and let me know what you think?" The team member agrees. Later, the leader says, "Since you're familiar with the report now, could you attend a short meeting about it?" Again, the answer is yes. Eventually, the leader says, "We need someone to oversee this project, and you already know so much about it. Would you consider taking the lead?" The final request is much bigger than the first, but by now, it feels like a natural extension of what has already been done. This method works in personal relationships as well. A friend might start by asking, "Can you watch my dog for an hour while I run an errand?" After that favor is granted, they might later ask, "Would you mind watching him for the whole afternoon next weekend?" Each step builds on the last. By the time the favor grows to, "Could you keep him for the weekend while I travel?" the request feels reasonable because of the pattern already established. Timing plays a role in how effective this technique is. The larger request should not come too soon, or it will feel abrupt and manipulative. There needs to be a natural progression, with each step connected to the one before it. If too much time passes, however, the momentum fades. The person may forget their earlier commitment or no longer feel connected to it. The best results come when the sequence feels like part of one continuous interaction. The person making the requests must also remain calm and genuine. If they seem overly eager or pushy, suspicion arises. The process works best when it appears natural, as if the larger request simply grew out of the smaller one. This requires patience and careful listening. Each yes should feel like a choice, not a trap. There is a psychological reason why this works so reliably. When people take an action, they tend to adjust their beliefs to match it. If someone agrees to a small favor, they begin to see themselves as cooperative. Later, when faced with a bigger favor, they want to act in a way that is consistent with that self-image. This internal drive for consistency is powerful. It guides behavior even when the person is not aware of it. They tell themselves a story about who they are, and each action becomes another chapter in that story. This can be seen clearly in community organizing. A group trying to clean up a neighborhood might first ask residents to sign a pledge to keep the area tidy. Signing takes only a moment and requires no physical effort. Later, the group asks those same residents to join a weekend cleanup event. Many who sign the pledge will show up, even if they had no intention of volunteering at first. The initial act of signing created a commitment, however small, that guided their later behavior. The first favor also builds trust. By starting small, the requester demonstrates respect for the other person's boundaries. Each successful step strengthens the relationship. The person asked feels valued and included, rather than coerced. This trust makes future requests easier to accept. Even if the final favor is large, it feels like part of an ongoing partnership rather than a sudden demand. There are limits to this approach. If the final request is far too big compared to the earlier ones, the illusion of natural growth breaks. The person being asked may feel manipulated and resist. The progression must make sense. Each step flowing logically from the last. When done well, the person often looks back and feels proud of how far they've come, rather than resentful. The beauty of starting with a small favor is its simplicity. It does not rely on force or persuasion. It relies on the natural human desire to be consistent and helpful. Each small agreement lays a foundation for the next. Over time, a single yes can grow into significant cooperation. The person being asked feels in control, even as they are guided gently toward a larger goal. The one making the request achieves what they need, not through pressure, but through the quiet power of gradual steps. When two people speak, they rely on each other's expressions to navigate the conversation. A raised eyebrow signals doubt. A small smile shows approval. A frown warns of disapproval. Most interactions move smoothly because these signals are clear and constant. When one person removes those signals completely and keeps their face neutral, the rhythm breaks. The other person can no longer read what is happening. This uncertainty makes them uneasy, and in that unease, they often reveal far more than they intended. A neutral expression is not cold or hostile. It is calm and unreadable, like a still pond with no ripples. It gives nothing away. The eyes remain steady, the mouth relaxed, the muscles free of tension. To anyone watching, it appears natural, even effortless. Yet the effect is powerful. Without visible cues, the other person is left to guess. They project their own feelings, fears, and assumptions onto the blank face before them. In doing so, they expose their inner world. Imagine a workplace discussion where an employee explains why a project was delayed. Normally, a manager might nod to show understanding or frown to express concern. But this time, the manager says nothing and shows nothing. Their face remains perfectly neutral. The employee keeps talking, filling the silence with explanations. At first, they cover only the basic facts. Then, sensing no reaction, they begin to justify their actions. Still, there is no response. Finally, driven by discomfort, they reveal details they never planned to share. Internal conflicts, personal doubts, even mistakes. The manager has said almost nothing, yet they have learned everything they need to know. This works because humans hate ambiguity. In conversation, they look for signs of approval or disapproval to guide their words. When those signs are missing, anxiety grows. The mind races to interpret the blankness. Did I say the wrong thing? Did they disagree? Are they upset? To relieve this tension, people start talking more, hoping to provoke a reaction. They reveal more context, more feelings, more truths. The neutral face remains steady, and every extra word becomes useful information. The effect is especially strong during negotiations. One party makes an offer and waits for a response. If the other side smiles or frowns, the meaning is clear. If they remain perfectly neutral, the first side begins to squirm. They might start lowering their price, sweetening their terms, or revealing deadlines they were trying to hide. The blank expression gives them nothing to work with, so they try to fill the void with their own words. The one who stays silent gains leverage without ever making a demand. Timing is important. A neutral expression is most effective at key moments. After a statement, during a pause, or while the other person waits for feedback. Holding it too long can seem unnatural, even robotic. The aim is to be calm, not stiff. Small, natural movements like blinking or breathing keep the face human while still withholding emotion. The neutrality must feel intentional, not accidental. Consider a personal situation. Two friends are discussing plans for the weekend. One says, "I might have to cancel because something came up." Normally, the other friend might respond with surprise or disappointment. Instead, they simply keep a neutral face and wait. The first friend feels the weight of that silence. "It's just that my cousin is visiting," they add quickly. Still no reaction. "Well, actually, it's my cousin and her partner, and they've been having problems, so I thought I should be around." In their discomfort, They keep explaining until the full truth comes out. The blank expression has acted like a mirror, reflecting back their own anxiety. This technique works because people tend to see what they expect. If someone feels guilty, they will interpret neutrality as judgment. If they feel confident, they will see it as agreement. The blank face does not change, but the meaning shifts based on the viewer's state of mind. This makes it a powerful tool for revealing insecurities. By giving nothing, you allow the other person to reveal everything. Body language must match the neutrality of the face. A still posture, steady breathing, and relaxed shoulders reinforce the effect. If the body fidgets or gestures wildly, the illusion breaks. The other person will sense mixed signals and may grow suspicious. The entire presence must be calm and centered, like a quiet observer rather than an active participant. In group settings, a neutral expression can influence everyone at once. Imagine a meeting where several people are arguing. A leader listens silently, their face unreadable. As the discussion grows heated, participants glance at the leader, searching for approval or guidance. Finding none, they begin to adjust their behavior. Some grow more careful with their words. Others overcompensate, talking more loudly or defensively. The leader learns not only the content of the arguments, but also the personalities and insecurities of the team, all without speaking. There is a psychological explanation for this response. Humans are social creatures who rely on feedback to feel safe. When feedback disappears, the brain enters a state of uncertainty. This uncertainty creates stress, and stress drives action. The easiest action is to speak, to explain, to try to close the gap. The more uncertain the environment, the more likely people are to overshare. A neutral expression turns this natural impulse into a tool. This method is especially useful when someone is hiding something. Direct questions often make people defensive. They prepare answers and guard their emotions. A blank face bypasses this defense. It feels passive, even harmless. The person believes they are in control because no one is challenging them. In that comfort, they relax, and when they relax, they reveal. Consider a courtroom setting. A lawyer questions a witness, then steps back and keeps a neutral face. The witness looks for signs of approval or doubt, finding none. Nervous, they begin to expand on their answer. "Well, what I meant was," they start, adding new details. The more they speak, the more inconsistencies appear. The lawyer does not need to attack or interrupt. The witness unravels on their own, driven by the need to fill the silence. Neutrality must be practiced. It is natural to react, smiling when amused, frowning when concerned. Maintaining a blank face requires awareness and control. Breathing steadily helps. So does focusing on listening rather than judging. The goal is not to suppress all feeling, but to keep those feelings from showing outwardly. Over time, this becomes easier, like holding a calm surface over deeper currents. Cultural context matters too. In some cultures, a neutral expression is seen as polite and respectful. In others, it may feel cold or distant. Understanding the setting ensures that the blankness is interpreted correctly. Even when misread, however, it still creates a powerful reaction. People will project their own meaning, whether positive or negative, onto the stillness. When used carefully, this technique can reveal truths that words alone cannot reach. The blank face acts as a canvas. Others paint their own thoughts across it, showing fears they never speak aloud. By giving nothing, you create space for everything to surface. In that quiet space, insecurities emerge, stories unfold, and the deepest parts of a person's mind become visible, not through force, but through the simple power of what remains hidden. A nod may seem like nothing more than a small motion of the head, but in conversation, it carries a weight that words alone cannot. When someone speaks, they search for signs that their message is understood and accepted. Even the smallest gesture can guide how they continue. A subtle, steady nod provides that signal without interrupting them. It tells them, without sound, that you are present, listening, and receptive. Over time, this small motion builds trust and makes them more open to sharing their thoughts and even agreeing with yours. People are wired to respond to feedback during conversation. When someone talks and sees no reaction, they feel uncertain. They start to wonder if they are being heard or if their words make sense. That doubt can cause them to close off, speak less, or become defensive. A light nod removes that doubt. It is a quiet form of reassurance. It says, "I'm following you. Keep going." This encourages them to continue, often going deeper into their ideas and feelings than they originally intended. Consider a workplace meeting where a team member presents a new idea. As they speak, others sit silently, their faces neutral. The speaker begins confidently, but as the lack of response stretches on, they hesitate. Their voice softens. They rush to finish, unsure of how their idea is landing. Now imagine one person at the table, giving a slow, gentle nod every so often. The speaker notices this small motion and gains confidence. They expand their points, explain more thoroughly, and even reveal the reasoning behind their decisions. Nothing was said, yet the nod created a safe space for honesty and depth. The timing of the nod matters. Too much nodding feels unnatural and insincere, like an exaggerated performance. It can make the speaker suspicious or even annoyed. Too little, and the reassurance disappears. The ideal nod is slow and occasional, appearing at natural pauses in speech. It should feel like a natural reaction, not a calculated move. When done well, it blends into the flow of conversation, so smoothly that the speaker never consciously notices it, though they feel its effect. This subtle encouragement has a deeper psychological impact. Humans are influenced by what they perceive as agreement. Seeing someone nod while they speak creates a sense of alignment. Even if no words of agreement are spoken, the body language suggests support. Over time, this builds rapport. The speaker begins to feel that you are on their side. They may grow more receptive to your ideas later, simply because you created that foundation of nonverbal agreement early on. Imagine a negotiation between two business partners. One presents their case, outlining why certain terms are necessary. The other listens, nodding slightly at key moments. This does not mean they agree to everything. It simply shows that they are listening and understanding. The presenter, feeling acknowledged, grows more comfortable. They start adding extra details, even revealing what matters most to them. When it is time to counteroffer, the listener has far more information to work with. The nod has encouraged openness and provided insight that might not have come from direct questioning. Light nodding also helps during conflict. When people argue, they often talk past each other. Each side feels unheard and misunderstood. A nod can break this cycle. It does not signal surrender or agreement with the opposing view. It signals that the words are being received. This can lower defenses and reduce tension. For example, during a heated debate, one person might say, "I don't think you understand how hard this has been for me." If the other responds with a calm, slow nod before speaking, the first person feels acknowledged. This small gesture can shift the entire tone of the exchange. The effect is not limited to formal settings. In everyday conversations, nodding builds connection. Friends talking over coffee, parents listening to their children, strangers meeting for the first time, all benefit from this subtle cue. When someone feels truly heard, they naturally share more. They may reveal personal stories, hidden worries, or dreams they rarely discuss. The nod acts like an open door, inviting them to step through. The physical execution of the nod matters as much as timing. A good nod is slight, with minimal movement. It should not resemble a bow or a sharp jerk. The motion is smooth and steady, almost like breathing. It begins with a gentle dip of the chin and returns to neutral slowly. This natural rhythm mirrors calmness and attentiveness. If the motion is too fast or abrupt, it sends a different message: impatience, nervousness, or false enthusiasm. Pairing the nod with other body language strengthens its impact. Leaning forward slightly shows interest. Keeping the arms relaxed and uncrossed signals openness. Maintaining steady, warm eye contact reinforces the sense of connection. Together, these nonverbal cues create a space where the speaker feels safe and valued. The nod alone is powerful, but when combined with a composed, attentive posture, it becomes even more effective. There is also a subtle influence on decision-making. When someone talks while seeing gentle nods, they begin to feel that their thoughts are valid and accepted. This feeling can carry over when roles reverse. Later in the conversation, when you present your own ideas, they are more likely to nod back. This mirroring creates a cycle of agreement. It builds momentum toward cooperation without either person forcing it. Over time, this pattern deepens trust and makes collaboration easier. Consider a teacher working with a hesitant student. The student struggles to explain their reasoning, worried about being wrong. The teacher listens quietly, nodding lightly at moments of effort or clarity. The student feels supported, so they continue speaking. By the end, they have not only solved the problem, but also built confidence. The nod was not praise or correction, yet it guided the student toward greater expression. Cultural context shapes how nodding is interpreted. In many places, a nod is a universal sign of understanding. In others, it may have different meanings. Being aware of these nuances ensures that the gesture is received as intended. Even where interpretations vary, the general principle holds. Visible acknowledgement encourages speech, while a lack of feedback creates hesitation. Light nodding can also be used to guide group dynamics. In a team setting, when one person speaks and sees nods from others, they feel included and respected. This can encourage participation and build cohesion. A leader who uses subtle nods throughout a meeting can manage the flow of conversation without dominating it. The group feels heard and discussions stay balanced. The technique must be used with care. Overuse makes it meaningless. If someone nods constantly, emotion becomes background noise, like a repetitive sound that no longer registers. Worse, it can seem fake, as if the listener is pretending to care. The power of nodding comes from its scarcity and sincerity. Each nod should have purpose. It should match the rhythm of the words being spoken and reflect genuine attention. In high-stakes conversations, this small gesture can have lasting effects. During job interviews, negotiations, or personal talks about difficult topics, people are often nervous. A calm, light nod offers silent reassurance. It steadies the moment and encourages honesty. The person speaking feels guided without being pushed, heard without being judged. Though it seems minor, light nodding shapes the invisible current beneath every conversation. It signals understanding when words might fail. It lowers barriers, invites openness, and creates subtle alignment between people. When done with care, it turns a simple exchange of words into a deeper connection, built on trust and the quiet rhythm of shared presence. Conversations are shaped by more than words and tone. The physical environment, including what lies between two people, has a quiet influence on how they feel and behave. A simple object, placed deliberately between two people, can change the entire atmosphere of an interaction. It might be a coffee cup, a notebook, a folder, or even a phone. To the casual observer, it seems harmless. But to those in the moment, it becomes a subtle barrier, creating distance and tension that are felt more than seen. Humans are sensitive to boundaries. From childhood, people learn to read the space around them for signs of safety or danger. When the area between two people is open, it signals trust and cooperation. When that space is blocked, even slightly, the body reacts. The barrier doesn't need to be large or obvious. A single object is enough to change the feeling of the exchange. It introduces a sense of separation, as if one person has built a small wall to protect themselves. Imagine a manager meeting with an employee to discuss performance. The manager arrives with a closed laptop in hand. Instead of setting it to the side, They place it directly between them on the table, perfectly centered. The employee begins speaking, but their eyes keep drifting toward the laptop. They can't help but feel that the manager is hiding behind it, creating a shield. Even if the conversation is polite, a slight unease grows. The employee starts to speak more carefully, weighing every word. The manager, whether they intended it or not, has used a simple object to assert subtle control. This effect is not just psychological. There's a practical element too. A barrier restricts physical movement. It prevents leaning forward, passing paper smoothly, or making easy gestures. These small interruptions disrupt the natural rhythm of conversation. Over time, they add up, creating a sense of formality or even mistrust. The person on the other side begins to feel that they must defend their position rather than share openly. Consider a negotiation in a small office. Two people sit at a table with a single folder of documents. At first, the folder rests off to one side. The discussion flows freely. Both sides lean forward, using hand gestures, making eye contact. Then one person slides the folder to the center, straightening it between them like a thin wall. The mood changes. The other person sits back slightly. Their hands fold on their lap. The conversation slows. Nothing dramatic has happened, yet the shift is clear. The folder has become a silent message. There is now a line between us. In sales settings, this principle is often visible. A customer might place their bag or coffee cup on the table between them and the salesperson. They may not even realize they've done it. But the gesture signals hesitation. The salesperson, sensing this, might respond by moving their own materials to create an open space. By removing the barrier, they reduce tension and make agreement easier. In this way, objects act as physical expressions of hidden feelings. The placement of a barrier can also reveal status. In some executive offices, large desks are positioned so that visitors must sit across from the leader with a wide surface between them. The desk is not just furniture. It is a statement of power. It says, "This is my space, and you must cross it to reach me." The visitor, aware of the separation, often speaks more cautiously. Even if the leader never raises their voice, the barrier does the work of establishing authority. Timing matters when introducing a barrier. If it appears too early in the interaction, it can seem defensive or hostile. For instance, if someone sits down and immediately places a notebook between themselves and the other person, the message is clear: I am protecting myself. This can cause the other person to mirror the behavior, adding their own barrier, and soon, both sides are walled off. But if the object is placed later, after trust has been established, it feels more like a natural shift than a confrontation. There is also a difference between deliberate and accidental barriers. A casually placed cup may have little effect, while a carefully aligned stack of papers can feel intentional and strategic. The human brain notices patterns and reads meaning into them. A barrier that looks purposeful carries more weight than one that seems random. For this reason, skilled negotiators pay attention to the arrangement of objects on the table. They know that small adjustments can influence mood and perception. Imagine a dinner conversation between two people discussing a difficult subject. At first, the table is clear except for plates and glasses. The mood is open, even warm. Then, as the discussion becomes tense, one person slowly moves their water glass closer, positioning it directly between them. It's a small motion, almost invisible, yet it changes the dynamic. The other person feels the shift and leans back slightly. The glass has become a quiet declaration: I need distance. In law enforcement interviews, interrogators are trained to notice barriers. A suspect who sits with crossed arms and a clipboard held close to their chest is literally building a wall with their body and objects. An experienced interrogator might respond by clearing the table, removing items one by one until there is nothing left between them. As the physical space opens, The psychological walls often come down as well. The suspect begins to talk more freely, unaware that the change in furniture played a role. Barriers can also be used strategically to protect one's own emotions. A therapist listening to a painful story might keep a box of tissues nearby, placed gently between themselves and the client. The object serves two purposes. It offers comfort to the client and provides a subtle boundary for the therapist. Without a word, it says, "I am here with you, but I am also safe." This quiet balance allows the therapist to remain empathetic without being overwhelmed. The type of object matters too. A soft item like a cushion creates a different feeling than a hard, angular one like a laptop or a briefcase. A personal item, such as a photo or a favorite mug, signals something different than a purely functional object. Each choice adds layers of meaning. A strategically placed coffee cup might suggest casualness, while a closed binder suggests formality and control. Lighting and environment can amplify or reduce the effect. In a brightly lit, open space, a barrier might feel less intimidating. In a dim, enclosed room, the same object can seem much larger and more imposing. The mind blends physical cues with emotional context, shaping the overall experience. The barrier technique works because it taps into instinct. Long before humans built offices or conference rooms, physical separation meant safety. A rock, a tree, or even a line of water between two people provided protection. These ancient responses still influence behavior today. When something is placed between two people, no matter how small, the body reacts as if a boundary has been drawn. The person who understands this can guide interactions without speaking a word. By placing an object carefully, they can signal caution, create distance, or establish dominance. By removing a barrier, they can invite openness and connection. The objects themselves are silent, but the messages they send are loud and clear to anyone sensitive enough to notice. Eye contact holds conversations together. It signals attention, connection, and intent. When two people maintain steady eye contact, there is a sense of balance. Each person knows where they stand, and the flow feels natural. Breaking that connection at a precise moment disrupts this balance. It creates a sudden shift that unsettles the other person. The moment feels incomplete, like a sentence cut off mid-word, and the one left holding the gaze is pushed to fill the silence, often by revealing more than they planned. A sudden drop in eye contact works because humans read it as a message, even if no words are spoken. When someone looks away unexpectedly, the brain rushes to interpret why. Was something wrong? Did they see something they didn't like? Did they lose interest? That instant of uncertainty sparks a need for resolution. The other person starts talking more, explaining themselves, trying to pull the attention back. In their rush to regain balance, they often share thoughts or details they had intended to keep private. Imagine a manager listening to an employee explain why a project failed. The manager maintains calm, steady eye contact as the employee outlines their reasons. The employee grows more confident, thinking they are being understood. Then, just as they finish an important point, the manager abruptly looks down at a notepad or off to the side, expression neutral. The employee falters. The smooth rhythm of their words breaks. They begin to backtrack, filling the gap with extra explanations. They might admit to mistakes or reveal conflicts within the team, things they never mentioned before. The manager has not accused or questioned them. The simple act of looking away at the right moment created pressure that drew the truth out. This tactic is most effective when the eye contact before the break has been steady and focused. If someone rarely looks up during a conversation, breaking eye contact means little. But when there has been strong connection, the sudden absence is jarring. It's like a warm light being switched off without warning. The contrast amplifies the effect. The other person feels it immediately and reacts, even if they don't fully understand why. In negotiations, timing is everything. One side might make a proposal, watching closely for the other's reaction. If the listener holds eye contact while staying silent, the speaker grows anxious but stays on track. Then, at the exact moment the speaker mentions their bottom line, the listener breaks eye contact and glances away, as if unimpressed or deep in thought. The speaker scrambles to regain their footing. They may lower their offer, add incentives, or reveal more information just to reestablish connection. The eye contact break has shifted control without a single word. The movement itself must be clean and natural. A slow, hesitant glance away looks weak or nervous. A deliberate, sudden drop has power. It should happen at a sharp point in the conversation, like a cut in film editing. The direction matters too. Looking down can signal disappointment or disapproval. Looking sideways can suggest distraction or withdrawal. Looking upward might appear thoughtful or calculating. Each variation carries a slightly different meaning, and the listener's mind will rush to fill in the blanks. Consider a personal relationship. Two friends are discussing a conflict. One explains their feelings, leaning in, seeking understanding. The other listens intently, nodding and maintaining warm eye contact. Then, just as the first friend says, "I don't know if you can forgive me," the other looks away sharply, gaze shifting to the floor. The first friend feels a rush of panic. A lack of visual connection makes them feel exposed. They may begin apologizing more deeply, confessing things they hadn't planned to say, desperate to repair the bond. The silence caused by the broken gaze speaks louder than any response could. Body language around the eye contact must stay controlled. If the person looking away also fidgets, crosses their arms, or sighs, the message becomes too obvious. It may seem like anger or rejection. The true strength of this technique lies in subtlety. The face remains calm, the body still. Only the eyes move. This makes the action seem unplanned, as if the break was instinctive rather than strategic. The other person senses the shift but cannot fully read it, which keeps them off balance. In group settings, breaking eye contact can influence more than one person. Imagine a team meeting where a leader listens to a debate. While someone speaks passionately, the leader holds their gaze steadily. Just as the speaker makes a strong claim, the leader suddenly looks down at their notes. The speaker hesitates. Others in the room notice and begin questioning the claim themselves. The leader has silently redirected the group's focus without interrupting the flow of discussion. The psychological effect of sudden disconnection is rooted in basic human instincts. Eye contact signals safety and understanding. It reassures the brain that the interaction is stable. When that signal disappears, even for a moment, it triggers a subtle stress response. The body reacts before the mind has time to process. Heart rate increases slightly. Breathing shifts. The speaker feels compelled to act, to speak, to do something that restores the lost connection. This reaction happens deep below conscious thought, which is why it is so reliable. There are risks to using this tactic too often. If someone repeatedly breaks eye contact at key moments, others will notice and become guarded. They may see it as manipulative or even disrespectful. The power comes from its rarity. Used sparingly, it feels natural and carries impact. Overused, it loses its edge and may damage trust. Like a sharp tool, it must be handled with care. Cultural context plays a role as well. In some cultures, eye contact is a sign of respect and engagement. In others, it may be seen as confrontational or inappropriate. Understanding these differences ensures that the break in eye contact is read correctly. Even where norms vary, the sudden change still creates a reaction. People everywhere notice when a connection disappears unexpectedly. In legal settings, this technique can expose lies or uncertainty. A lawyer might question a witness while holding strong eye contact. Just as the witness answers, The lawyer looks away abruptly. As if uninterested, the witness, feeling unsettled, often rushes to add more detail. Their words may reveal contradictions or weaknesses in their story. The lawyer doesn't need to accuse them outright. The break in eye contact does the work silently. Pairing this with silence magnifies the effect. When someone looks away and says nothing, the pressure intensifies. The other person rushes to fill the void with words. They may clarify, justify, or even confess, all in an effort to restore balance. The listener gains information simply by withholding both gaze and speech. Breaking eye contact suddenly is like pulling a rug out from under a conversation. It shifts the ground beneath the other person's feet. For a moment, they are unsure of where they stand. In that uncertainty, they reveal their true thoughts and feelings. The action is small and fleeting, but its impact lingers, shaping the rest of the interaction long after the eyes meet again.